I am Paige, 28 years old, and a crisis public relations director who makes a living cleaning up the disasters of others. So when my best friend Savannah sat across from me in an upscale Seattle cafe, weeping hysterically about my husband, I did not break down. I watched her tears fall onto the marble table and listened as she gasped out a confession. I saw Liam kissing someone else at the mall. I am so sorry, Paige. I just hugged her tight and whispered that she had nothing to be sorry for. Then I placed a magnetic hotel keycard on the table. It was the exact same boutique hotel she had just tagged on her Instagram story. The color immediately drained from her face. She thought she was saving me by throwing a random woman under the bus, but I had been tracking her affair with my husband for weeks. What she did not know yet was that the shark divorce lawyer I had just hired to destroy them both was her own husband. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to outsmart someone who thought you were a fool. The espresso machine hissed loudly in the background of the crowded artisan cafe in downtown Seattle. Savannah gripped my hands across the cold marble table. Her perfectly manicured acrylic nails dug into my skin. Tears streamed down her flawless cheeks, ruining her expensive foundation. She was putting on the performance of a lifetime. I saw Liam at the mall. She sobbed, her chest heaving dramatically. He was kissing a blonde woman outside the jewelry store. Paige, I am so sorry. I did not want to be the one to tell you, but you had to know. Your husband is cheating on you. I let the words hang in the air between us. Any normal wife would be begging for details, demanding to know what the blonde looked like, or reaching for her phone to call her husband and scream. I did none of those things. I simply picked up my iced Americano and took a slow, deliberate sip. The roast coffee tasted bitter and sharp, exactly what I needed. I looked at Savannah. We had been friends since college. She was an event planner for the city elite, always obsessed with looking wealthy and connected. She wore a designer silk blouse today, probably bought with the credit card Liam had secretly opened for her. I reached across the table and pulled her into a comforting hug. "Do not be sorry, Savannah," I whispered softly into her ear. I pulled back and opened my leather tote bag. My movements were slow and measured. I reached inside and pulled out a sleek black magnetic keycard. I placed it gently on the center of the marble table right next to her half-empty matcha latte. "I found this inside the inner pocket of his navy suit jacket yesterday," I said, my voice completely level. "It belongs to the Grand Pearl Boutique Hotel. What a coincidence that you just posted a photo from their penthouse balcony on your Instagram story yesterday afternoon." Savannah stared at the keycard. The theatrical tears stopped instantly. The exaggerated sobbing completely disappeared. I watched the blood drain from her face, leaving her skin ash pale. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. She had thought she was so clever. She had staged this entire cafe intervention to throw me off their scent. Liam must have realized he was being sloppy and they panicked. They decided to feed me a fake story about a random blonde at the mall, so I would not suspect the best friend sitting right in front of me. I did not raise my voice. I did not flip the table or throw my coffee in her face. I am a crisis management specialist. I handle scandals for tech billionaires and politicians. When a crisis hits, I do not panic. I gather data and I neutralize the threat. Savannah started to stammer. "Paige, I can explain. It is a misunderstanding." I stood up from my chair and smoothed the wrinkles from my tailored pencil skirt. "Save your breath, Savannah," I said, dropping a $20 bill onto the table to cover the drinks. "You are going to need it." I turned on my heel and walked out of the cafe, leaving her suffocating in her own paranoia. I walked briskly to my car parked a block away. The crisp Seattle air felt refreshing against my face. As soon as I slid into the driver's seat, I put my car in gear and headed straight to my public relations agency. My phone buzzed constantly in the cup holder. Savannah calling, Liam calling. I ignored all of them. The panic was setting in for them, but my work was just beginning. I walked into my agency an hour later. My assistant handed me a stack of urgent messages. I walked past the glass walls of the conference room where my team was waiting. "We have a crisis with the software CEO," I announced, tossing my coat onto a chair. "Draft a press release, denying the embezzlement rumors, and prepare a counter-narrative focusing on his recent philanthropic donations." Once the team was dispatched, I walked into my private office and locked the door. I sat at my desk and opened my secure laptop. I bypassed the password and used a biometric scan to open an encrypted folder. The file was labeled Divorce. I clicked a PDF containing my signed retainer. The signature belonged to the most ruthless family law attorney in Washington. His name was Dominic. He also happened to be the husband of Savannah. Dominic had no idea the woman he was about to financially obliterate was his own wife. Staring at Dominic's signature on the encrypted retainer agreement, a sharp thrill of anticipation coursed through my veins. Dominic was notoriously cutthroat, a man who dismantled corporate empires and wealthy marriages with surgical precision. Savannah had bragged about his courtroom victories for years at our dinner parties, completely oblivious to the fact that her husband's legal brilliance was now aimed directly at her own destruction. I closed the file and leaned back in my leather chair. The silence of my private office was a stark contrast to the storm I was meticulously brewing. I thought back to exactly 3 weeks ago, the night the illusion of my perfect marriage first shattered. Liam had claimed he was working a late sales conference in Silicon Valley. As a tech sales executive, his schedule was genuinely demanding, full of last-minute flights and client dinners. But Liam had made one critical mistake. He forgot that he was married to a woman whose entire career revolved around digital forensics and crisis management. My agency uses advanced sentiment tracking and geolocation software to monitor potential scandals for our high-net-worth clients. That night, an automated alert I had set up for Liam's public profiles triggered on my secondary monitor. It was a simple photo tag from a regional tech summit, but the background reflection caught a glimpse of his smartwatch. The time zone displayed on his wrist did not match California. It matched a luxury resort in Aspen. It took me less than 40 minutes to breach his digital footprint. I did not need his phone passwords. I cross-referenced his frequent flyer miles, pulled the public metadata from Savannah's supposedly solo vacation posts, and mapped their geo-coordinates. They matched perfectly. Every extravagant dinner Savannah posted about on her social media had a corresponding phantom withdrawal from Liam's hidden accounts. They had been carrying on this affair for 6 entire months, laughing behind my back while spending the money I had helped Liam invest. A sharp knock on my glass door pulled me out of the flashback. My senior strategist, Evan, walked in carrying a thick stack of printed briefs. "The situation with the software CEO is escalating," Evan said, handing me the top file. "The press got a hold of the leaked audio. The board of directors is threatening to vote him out by tomorrow morning." I shifted instantly from betrayed wife to crisis director. I scanned the brief, my mind automatically categorizing the threats and neutralizing them. "Leak a counter-story to the major business outlets," I ordered, my voice steady and commanding. "Emphasize his recent $50 million philanthropic donation to the Children's Hospital. Frame the leaked audio as an unauthorized AI deepfake created by a disgruntled former employee. Draft a cease and desist letter to the publication holding the audio, and have our legal team threaten a defamation lawsuit before the markets close. We control the narrative, Evan. We do not react to it." Evan nodded vigorously, taking furious notes. "You are a lifesaver, Paige. I will get this out immediately." As he rushed out of the office, my phone vibrated on the desk. A text message from Liam lit up the screen. "Hey, beautiful. Looking forward to our double date with Trey and Jasmine tonight. I booked the best table at the steakhouse. Love you." I stared at the glowing words. "Love you." The sheer audacity of his manipulation was almost impressive. Liam always played the golden boy, the charismatic tech executive who treated his wife like a queen in public. Tonight would be no different, except I knew exactly what he was planning to do at that dinner. I locked my laptop, grabbed my coat, and took the private elevator down to the parking garage. The drive to the restaurant gave me time to mentally prepare. I navigated through the heavy evening traffic, my mind calculating every possible angle of the upcoming conversation. Liam was bringing me to an expensive steakhouse with his sister Jasmine and her husband Trey for a very specific reason. He wanted an audience. I arrived at the restaurant handing my keys to the valet. The establishment was a classic display of modern American wealth, all dark mahogany, dim lighting, and dry-aged steaks that cost more than a car payment. I spotted them at a corner booth. Jasmine was laughing loudly at something Liam had said. Trey sat quietly beside her, nursing a glass of bourbon. Trey was an investment bank branch director, a man of few words but incredible observation skills. He always seemed to be watching the room, calculating the hidden dynamics. Liam stood up the moment he saw me, pulling me into a tight embrace and kissing my cheek. "There is my gorgeous wife," he announced loudly enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "How was the agency today, honey? Saving the corporate world one scandal at a time." I smiled warmly and took my seat next to him. "Just the usual fires to put out," I replied smoothly, unfolding my cloth napkin. "I am glad I could make it." Jasmine leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Liam was just telling us about your new business plans, Paige. He says you two are finally ready to take the next step." I kept my smile frozen in place. The next step, here it was, the opening maneuver. Liam placed his hand over mine, squeezing gently. "Well, I did not want to spoil the surprise," Liam said, looking at me with perfect, manufactured adoration. "But I have been talking to some real estate brokers. There is a gorgeous 5-bedroom property in the suburbs that just hit the market. It is in the best school district. I think it is time we pull some equity out of your PR agency, Paige. We need a bigger nest egg if we are going to start trying for a baby." He delivered the lines flawlessly. In front of his sister, he positioned himself as the devoted family man eager to start a new chapter. He made it sound like liquidating the assets of the company I had built from the ground up was simply a logical step toward our future. If I refused, I would look like the cold career-obsessed wife who cared more about her business than starting a family. I looked at Liam's earnest expression, knowing full well that he had absolutely no intention of buying a family home or having a baby with me. He was trying to extract my hard-earned capital to fund his secret offshore accounts and build a new life with Savannah. I did not flinch. I did not pull my hand away. Instead, I squeezed his fingers back and smiled directly into his lying eyes. "That sounds like a fascinating investment strategy, Liam," I said, my voice dripping with sweet compliance. "We should definitely discuss restructuring the finances." Across the table, Trey took a slow sip of his bourbon, his dark eyes locked onto mine over the rim of his glass. He did not say a word, but the slight narrowing of his gaze told me everything. Trey knew something. And based on the cold, calculating look in his eyes, Liam was playing a very dangerous game in front of the wrong audience. The waiter arrived to take our drink orders, temporarily breaking the tension. Liam ordered an expensive bottle of Cabernet, celebrating his hypothetical future children with a grand gesture. I ordered a sparkling water with lime, maintaining my clear head. The evening was just beginning, and the steaks had not even been served yet. I watched Liam perform his role, laughing and charming the waiter, completely unaware that his perfect life was already standing on a trapdoor. I just had to decide the exact moment to pull the lever. The morning after the suffocating charade at the steakhouse, I arrived at my public relations agency before the sun even crested the Seattle skyline. The city was still shrouded in a thick gray fog, perfectly matching my cold mood. The office was dead silent, offering a rare moment of peace before the daily storm of corporate scandals and media spin began. I walked past the empty cubicles and locked my heavy oak door behind me. I lowered the motorized blinds, shutting out the outside world completely. I sat at my mahogany desk and breathed in the quiet. I booted up my secure laptop and completely bypassed the standard agency network. I plugged in a specialized hardware key and logged directly into an offline encrypted drive. The digital file stared back at me from the center of the screen. It was simply labeled divorce. It was not a folder born out of sudden heartbreak or reckless emotion. It was a meticulously curated database of betrayal. I opened the master spreadsheet. It was a terrifyingly precise ledger tracking every lie, every missing dollar, and every deleted text message over the past half year. The shift in Liam had not been a sudden explosion. It was a slow, subtle erosion of our daily routine that started exactly 6 months ago. I leaned back in my leather chair, remembering the exact morning the illusion fractured. I was standing in the kitchen making our usual morning espresso while he packed his gym bag. His phone vibrated loudly on the marble island. Normally, he would ask me to check the notification while his hands were full. That morning, he lunged across the kitchen counter, snatching the device face down before the screen could even illuminate. His excuse was incredibly clumsy. He claimed it was a demanding client in a European time zone. But crisis management is built entirely on studying human behavior under pressure. Liars always offer too many details. They fill the empty silence with unnecessary words to convince themselves as much as they are trying to convince you. Over the next few weeks, the warning signs multiplied exponentially. He changed his phone passcode from our anniversary date to a random string of numbers. He started taking his phone into the shower, playing loud music to mask the sound of typing. He claimed his tech sales job required unexpected weekend trips to regional summits that had never existed on his calendar before. When I politely questioned the sudden changes, he immediately started gaslighting me. He told me my demanding public relations schedule was making me paranoid and neglectful. He used my extreme dedication to my own agency as a weapon to excuse his emotional distance. He wanted me to feel guilty so I would stop looking closely. He thought I was just a busy career wife who trusted him implicitly. He forgot that I extract hidden truths for a living. I did not cry. I did not confront him. I gathered intelligence. I treated my failing marriage like a corporate espionage case. I installed a passive packet sniffer on our home network router. It silently intercepted his digital traffic whenever his phone automatically connected to our home network. I hired an independent forensic accountant using a secure shell company I kept for high-risk agency clients. We began tracking the financial anomalies. A $200 dinner charge here. A $500 boutique purchase there. The physical evidence he left behind was sickeningly cliché. The lingering scent of Savannah's signature jasmine perfume on his suit jackets. The inexplicable hundreds of miles added to his car odometer over a single weekend. But the digital footprint I compiled was absolutely bulletproof. I spent hours cross-referencing Liam's credit card expenditures with Savannah's public social media presence. When she posted a glowing photo of an expensive Wagyu steak with a vague caption about being spoiled, Liam's hidden checking account showed a charge for exactly that amount. The restaurant was 3 miles from his supposed corporate retreat. Every time she posted a new designer handbag, Liam had a corresponding cash withdrawal. I scrolled past the geolocation maps and the intercepted text transcripts. I closed the spreadsheet and opened a secure subfolder containing the legal framework of my exit strategy. A digital copy of my signed retainer agreement glowed brightly on the screen. 2 weeks ago, I had walked into the most intimidating glass-walled law firm in downtown Seattle. I did not just need a lawyer. I needed an apex predator. I needed someone who viewed asset division not as a reasonable negotiation, but as a brutal blood sport. I reviewed the heavy black ink signature at the bottom of the page. Dominic. He was a high-powered corporate and divorce attorney known throughout the city for scorching the earth and leaving nothing but ash for opposing counsel. His hourly retainer was exorbitant but worth every single penny I transferred. Dominic was methodical, ruthless, and entirely without mercy. As I traced the sharp loops of his signature on my screen, a cold, calculating smile spread across my face. I had handed Dominic a blind dossier during our initial consultation. I asked him to review the financial strategy while deliberately omitting all personal names and identifying details. He accepted the case based purely on the devastating financial leverage I presented. He was eager to absolutely obliterate the cheating husband and the gold-digging mistress outlined in my anonymous files. The beautiful, chilling reality was that Dominic still had no idea about the true identities of my targets. He did not know that the husband he was preparing to slaughter in court was Liam, and he had absolutely no clue that the mistress he was eagerly strategizing to leave penniless and broken was Savannah, his very own wife. The trap was perfectly set. Every lie they told was another nail in their coffins. I locked the screen and smiled. They were playing checkers while I was playing chess. The sommelier returned, presenting the vintage Cabernet with practiced theatricality. He poured a small tasting amount for Liam, who swirled the dark red liquid in his crystal glass with exaggerated sophistication. Liam nodded his approval, and the sommelier filled the remaining glasses before quietly stepping away. I took a sip of my sparkling water, feeling the carbonation bite my throat. The restaurant hummed around us, a symphony of clinking silver and low conversations among the Seattle elite. Waiters moved like ghosts, delivering plates of charred bone marrow and fresh oysters on beds of crushed ice. Jasmine reached for a piece of artisan bread, keeping her eyes fixed on me. She had always worshipped her older brother, treating his word as absolute truth. So Paige, she started her tone laced with that specific brand of passive aggression, unique to sister-in-laws. How exactly does one restructure a public relations firm? It sounds incredibly complicated. I mean, Liam says you work 80 hours a week just to keep it afloat. I smiled warmly, slicing a small piece of bread. It is a demanding industry, Jasmine, but the agency is actually highly profitable. We just landed 2 major tech accounts last quarter. That is exactly why Liam and I need to be careful with our assets. Liam leaned forward, resting his elbows on the polished wood table. His face was a mask of artificial concern. That is the thing, though, Paige. You are killing yourself for that company. He looked at Trey and Jasmine, shaking his head like a martyr. I watch her come home at midnight completely exhausted. I love her ambition, I really do. But we have to think about our priorities. If we want to bring a child into this world, we need stability. We need a proper home, not a downtown penthouse. He was executing a classic smear campaign. By framing my success as an unhealthy obsession, he positioned himself as the caring visionary, trying to save me from myself. He was planting the seeds to justify liquidating my life's work. I think Liam is right, Jasmine chimed in right on cue. You are 28, Paige. You are not getting any younger. A career is great, but family is everything. Liam is so ready to be a father. It is not fair to keep making him wait while you chase corporate clients. The sheer audacity of the attack was breathtaking. Liam was currently spending thousands of dollars a week funding Savannah's luxury lifestyle and hotel rendezvous. Yet here he was sitting in a Michelin-starred steakhouse, looking deeply wounded, playing the role of the neglected husband yearning for fatherhood. The gaslighting was so thick it was practically suffocating. Any other woman would have snapped. She would have defended her business, pointed out his demanding sales trips, or burst into tears at the unfairness of the ambush. I was a crisis manager. I knew that reacting defensively only validated the attacker's premise. You are absolutely right, Jasmine, I said, placing my hand gently over my heart. My voice was soft, radiating complete sincerity. Liam has been incredibly patient. I have been so focused on securing our financial independence that I sometimes lose sight of the bigger picture. I turned my gaze to Liam, softening my eyes. I want a family with you, Liam. I want that house. Liam blinked. For a fraction of a second, his perfect facade slipped, revealing a flash of sheer panic. He had expected me to fight him. He had primed Jasmine to help him wear me down over the course of the appetizers and entrees. My total immediate surrender derailed his entire psychological operation. He quickly recovered, flashing his signature charming smile. I knew you would understand, honey. It just makes financial sense to extract your equity now while the agency valuation is high. The waiter approached, holding a massive silver tray. He served us our main courses, setting down sizzling dry-aged ribeyes, truffle-infused potato puree, and roasted asparagus. The aroma of seared meat and rich butter filled the space between us. Trey picked up his steak knife. He had been completely silent since we sat down. As the branch director of a massive investment bank, Trey dealt with multi-million-dollar liquidations on a daily basis. He meticulously cut a piece of his ribeye, keeping his dark eyes leveled at Liam. Extracting equity from a sole proprietorship LLC is a heavy taxable event. Liam Trey said, his voice deep and rumbling. You would lose nearly 40% to capital gains and corporate restructuring fees. If you are looking for liquidity for a down payment, a commercial line of credit against the business assets makes much more mathematical sense. Why force Paige to pull hard cash and take a massive tax hit? The table went dead silent. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away. Trey had just driven a logical bulldozer straight through Liam's emotional manipulation. Liam swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing above his crisp collar. He shifted in his seat, suddenly looking very interested in his wine glass. Well, Trey, it is more about simplifying our portfolio. I want Paige to step back entirely. A line of credit keeps her tied to the daily operations. We want a clean break. It was a weak pivot. Trey knew it. I knew it. A commercial loan would require bank oversight, audits, and joint signatures. Extracting hard cash equity directly into a joint marital account would give Liam completely untraceable liquid funds. Funds he desperately needed to funnel into his offshore trust account for Savannah. I decided to throw Liam a lifeline. I needed him to believe he was still in control. I need him to execute the fraudulent transfer so Dominic can use it to destroy him in court. Actually, Trey, I think Liam has a point, I interjected, cutting a piece of asparagus. Taking on commercial debt right before starting a family sounds stressful. I would rather just liquidate my founder shares and have the cash free and clear. It gives us a clean slate to buy the house outright. Liam exhaled a quiet breath of relief. His chest visibly deflated as he raised his wineglass to me. To our clean slate, he toasted, his eyes shining with deceptive warmth. To our clean slate, I echoed, tapping my water glass against his crystal goblet. Jasmine clapped her hands together, thrilled that the tension had evaporated. Oh, I cannot wait to help you decorate the nursery, Paige. Savannah actually knows a fantastic interior designer who specializes in luxury baby rooms. We should absolutely invite her to lunch next week to start brainstorming. Hearing Savannah's name drop casually into the conversation sent a jolt of cold electricity down my spine. The mistress was already trying to infiltrate my hypothetical future home. I maintained my serene expression, taking a slow bite of my steak. The meat was perfectly cooked, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. That sounds wonderful, Jasmine, I replied, chewing methodically. I would love to hear Savannah's ideas. The rest of the dinner proceeded with nauseating politeness. Liam was riding a high of victorious adrenaline. He ordered a decadent chocolate soufflé for the table, acting like the benevolent king celebrating a conquered territory. He truly believed he had successfully gaslit his ambitious wife into handing over her business assets. He thought he was walking away with millions of dollars in untethered cash, ready to start a new elite life with my best friend. As the waiter cleared our dessert plates, Liam signaled for the check. He proudly handed over his titanium credit card, making sure Jasmine and Trey saw the grand gesture. I mentally calculated the exact dollar amount of the agency equity he thought he was stealing. It was close to $3 million. A highly specific amount that would soon become the cornerstone of my marital fraud lawsuit. Let us head out, Liam said, standing up and adjusting his suit jacket. I will go grab the car from the valet. Wait here with Jasmine and Trey Page. It is freezing outside. He kissed my forehead and walked confidently toward the restaurant exit. I watched his retreating back, admiring his absolute delusion. I stood up and gathered my coat, preparing to walk out to the valet stand. The dinner had set the stage perfectly, but the night was far from over. I just needed a moment alone to process the next phase of the execution. I pulled my coat tighter, stepping through the heavy glass doors into the biting Seattle night. Jasmine had ducked into the powder room, leaving Trey and me standing alone under the amber glow of the valet parking awning. The attendant scurried to retrieve Liam's SUV. Trey stood beside me, his hands buried in his dark overcoat, staring at the idling cars. As an investment bank director, Trey spent his entire life analyzing risk-assessing financial liabilities and reading the subtle shifts in human behavior signaling a bad deal. He thinks he is the smartest man in the room, Trey murmured. His deep voice barely carried over the loud street noise. It was not a question, but a clinical observation. I turned my head slightly, keeping my posture relaxed. He certainly tries hard to project that image, I replied evenly. Trey scoffed, a quiet, bitter sound radiating pure disgust. I deal with corporate parasites for a living, Paige. I sit across from ruthless men who would sell their own mothers for a fractional bump in their portfolio. Liam is not nearly as clever as he thinks. He is reckless and entitled. Before I could respond, Trey shifted his weight. In one fluid, seamless motion of practiced discretion, he slipped his hand out of his overcoat and brushed against my side. I felt a small, hard object slide into my pocket. I did not flinch or look down. My crisis management instincts took over, keeping my facial expression pleasantly blank for anyone who was watching. Do not look at it until you are completely secure, Trey instructed, his voice dropping an octave lower. He has been bleeding your joint investment accounts for the last 4 months. He is routing massive sums of your marital capital directly into an offshore anonymous trust. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I kept my breathing steady. Why are you giving this to me, Trey? I asked. He is your brother-in-law. Trey turned, his dark eyes flashing with cold authority. Because I refuse to let that arrogant child use my branch to execute marital fraud. He thought because the trust was decentralized, I would not flag the transaction anomalies. He was completely wrong. Burn him to the ground, Paige. At that exact moment, the sleek nose of Liam's SUV pulled up. The valet hopped out, holding the door open. Jasmine emerged from the restaurant, simultaneously chattering about the dessert menu. Trey stepped back, instantly reverting to his stoic, silent persona. He gave me a brief, respectful nod and assisted his wife into their town car. I slid directly into the passenger seat of our SUV. He put the car in gear and merged onto the wet downtown streets. He was practically humming, vibrating with the victorious adrenaline of a man who believed he had successfully manipulated his wife into liquidating her business assets. Liam started tapping his fingers against the leather steering wheel. I think that went incredibly well. I will have my advisor draw up the extraction paperwork for your agency equity tomorrow morning. We can start house hunting by the end of the weekend. I slipped my hand into my coat pocket, wrapping my fingers around the small metal USB drive Trey had dropped. I squeezed it tightly, grounding myself in the physical reality of the evidence hidden in my palm. That sounds incredibly efficient, Liam, I said, keeping my tone bright and supportive. I am so glad we are exactly on the same page. I reached into the back seat and grabbed my leather work tote, unzipping the main compartment to carefully pull out my silver laptop. What are you doing? Liam asked, glancing over at me. His tone held a flicker of annoyance, wanting my full attention to bask in his recent victory. Just a minor crisis at the agency. I lied smoothly, resting the laptop on my knees and opening the screen. Evan needs me to approve the final draft of a press release before the morning news cycle hits. It will only take a quick second. Liam sighed heavily, playing the long-suffering husband. See, this is exactly why we need to extract your equity. You work entirely too much, Paige. You really need to focus on us instead. I am focusing on us right now, I replied softly. I shielded the glowing screen by angling my body slightly toward the passenger window. I retrieved the USB drive from my pocket and slid it silently into the port. The device icon popped up on my desktop. I clicked it open with anticipation. Trey had been meticulously thorough. The digital folder contained high-resolution scans of every wire transfer, routing, slip, and bank statement Liam had attempted to hide. I opened the main ledger. The numbers were staggering. Liam had siphoned hundreds of thousands of dollars, redirecting the money through a shell company. I clicked the final PDF document. It was the official legal charter for the offshore trust fund. I scrolled rapidly past the dense legal jargon and the banking clauses straight to the bottom of the document. I needed to see who actually controlled the stolen money. I needed to see the endpoint of the fraud. My eyes locked onto the final page under the bold heading labeled Sole Beneficiary. The name printed there in crisp black ink hit me like a physical blow to the chest. It was not a random offshore corporation. It was not a hidden financial alias for Liam. The sole beneficiary of the offshore trust was listed as Savannah Hastings, her maiden name, the name she used before she married Dominic. The absolute betrayal settled over me like a suffocating blanket. Liam was not just cheating. He was actively attempting to build a multi-million-dollar empire for my best friend using my money. I closed the laptop with a soft click, staring out into the cold, rainy night. The game was no longer just about divorce. It was about utter annihilation. Exactly 36 hours later, I stepped off the private elevator into the penthouse lobby of Dominic's law firm. The space was a monument to corporate intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a dizzying panoramic view of the Puget Sound, while sleek steel accents and cold slate floors amplified the echo of my heels. There was no warmth here. It was a sterile, heavily fortified bunker designed for one specific purpose: destroying people. A perfectly postured assistant guided me through a maze of glass corridors and opened the heavy door to the corner office. Dominic was already waiting. He stood up from behind a massive slab of black marble that served as his desk. He was a striking man in his late 40s with sharp, predatory features and silver dusting the temples of his dark hair. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that draped flawlessly over his athletic frame. He moved with the terrifying grace of a shark sensing blood in the water. "Please sit, Paige," he said, gesturing to a white leather chair opposite his desk. "I reviewed the encrypted drive you delivered this morning." I sat down, crossing my legs and folding my hands in my lap. I maintained a posture of complete calm. "And what is your professional assessment, Dominic?" I asked. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the marble surface. His dark eyes locked onto mine, practically burning with predatory excitement. "It is a bloodbath," he stated flatly. "The data your contact provided from the investment bank is absolute perfection. We have the exact routing numbers, the shell company registration, and the offshore trust charter. Liam has been incredibly sloppy. He tried to build a financial fortress out of wet cardboard." I kept my expression entirely neutral. I assumed the offshore trust would be difficult to breach. Dominic scoffed a harsh, dismissive sound. "Offshore trusts are only secure if the money funding them is clean. Liam is funneling joint marital assets into an LLC to hide them from you. That is textbook fraudulent dissipation of marital assets. We are going to pierce the corporate veil so fast his head will spin. We will file an ex parte motion tomorrow morning. A judge will freeze every single account associated with his name and that shell company before he even finishes his morning coffee. He will be completely locked out of his own money." I nodded slowly, absorbing the tactical brilliance. "And what about the beneficiary?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly steady. "I redacted her name from the file I sent you for strategic privacy." Dominic waved his hand as if the mistress were nothing more than an annoying insect. "Whoever this gold digger is, she is about to experience the worst reality check of her life," he sneered. His voice dripped with absolute venom and contempt. "She thinks she has hit the jackpot. She thinks she has secured a multi-million-dollar nest egg by sleeping with another woman's husband. She is a parasite, Paige, a greedy, opportunistic leech." I took a slow, calculated breath, holding back the wild, hysterical laughter clawing at my throat. Dominic was sitting less than 5 feet away from me, ruthlessly insulting his own wife. He was aggressively sharpening the blade that would soon decapitate Savannah's entire existence. The dramatic irony was so thick and intoxicating it felt like a physical weight in the room. "We are not just going to stop at freezing the accounts," Dominic continued, his eyes narrowing with vicious intent. "We are going to sue her directly. We will drag whichever cheap homewrecker he is hiding straight into the courtroom. We will force her to sit through grueling depositions. We will make her hand over her bank records, her text messages, her emails. If Liam used your money to buy her jewelry or fund her vacations, we will seize it all. I am going to legally strip her down to the bone, Paige. By the time I am finished with her, she will not be able to afford a bus ticket out of Seattle." I watched him speak, mapping the sheer destruction he was promising. It was a flawless, scorched earth strategy. "I want to wait before we officially name her in the filings," I told him. "I want Liam to feel the trap closing around him first. I want the asset freeze to hit him while he still thinks he is in control." Dominic smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression that fully earned him his reputation. "I love the way you think, Paige. Surprise is our greatest weapon. Let him believe it is just a standard financial audit." We will blindside him. And we will not stop there. Does his technology firm have a morality clause for executive management? Yes, I replied immediately. I pulled his employment contract from our home safe last week. Any public scandal involving financial impropriety or severe reputational damage to the firm is grounds for immediate termination without severance. Dominic leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers together. Excellent. Once the court grants the asset freeze and the fraud becomes a matter of public record, we will ensure a copy of the filing quietly makes its way to his board of directors. We will not just take his money, Paige, we will shatter his professional reputation. He will be unemployable in this city. I felt a dark, satisfying thrill wash through my veins. It was the perfect execution plan. Liam thought he was extracting my hard-earned equity to fund a fantasy life with my best friend. Instead, he was walking blindly into a legal slaughterhouse, engineered by the very man his mistress was betraying. Dominic stood up, signaling the end of the strategy meeting. He walked around the marble desk and extended his hand. "Do not worry, Paige," he said, his voice shifting to a tone of reassuring confidence. "I know exactly how to handle women like her, and men like him. You are in the best hands in the city. We are going to win everything." I stood up and shook his hand, feeling the firm, resolute grip of my newly appointed executioner. "I know we will, Dominic," I replied, my voice echoing the cold certainty of the glass walls around us. "I know exactly what kind of man you are." I turned and walked out of the corner office, my heels clicking rhythmically against the slate floor. The trap was fully armed and loaded. Now all I had to do was wait for Liam to pull the trigger. Less than 48 hours later, my heels echoed against that exact same slate floor. The waiting game was over. Liam had officially initiated the transfer of equity from my agency, pulling the trigger on his own demise. I walked straight past the perfectly postured assistant, ignoring her protests, and pushed open the heavy door to the corner office. Dominic looked up from his black marble desk, a sharp reprimand dying on his lips the moment he saw the thick manila folder in my hands. I did not bother with pleasantries. I stepped up to the desk and dropped the folder onto the smooth stone surface. I slid it deliberately across the expanse of marble until it bumped gently against his gold pen set. "What is this, Paige?" Dominic asked. His voice was laced with mild annoyance at the interruption, but his predatory curiosity was already piqued. "The execution order," I replied smoothly, taking my seat in the white leather chair. "I told you Liam was sloppy. He is not just transferring the assets to a standard joint account. A highly placed financial contact intercepted the final destination of the funds. I have the entire architecture of his offshore maneuver. The routing numbers, the shell corporation, the offshore trust, and the registered mailing addresses. Everything is in that folder." Dominic leaned forward. The annoyance vanished instantly, completely replaced by the cold, calculating focus of a legal assassin. He opened the manila folder and began extracting the printed documents I had pulled from Trey's USB drive. The silence in the room grew heavy, punctuated only by the sharp rustle of crisp paper turning. "This is remarkably thorough," Dominic murmured, his eyes scanning the top sheets with rapid precision. "He is using a layered LLC structure routed through the Cayman Islands to obfuscate the ultimate beneficiary. It is a classic laundering technique, but poorly executed. He left a direct paper trail from his domestic accounts to the primary holding shell." He laid the first few pages aside and picked up the central charter for the offshore trust. I sat perfectly still, watching his face. I knew exactly what was printed on page 4. I knew exactly what he was about to read. "We can freeze this immediately," Dominic continued, his tone brimming with arrogant satisfaction. "We have the shell company name and the registered P.O. box in downtown Seattle. I will have my paralegals draft the injunction within the hour. We are going to bleed this woman dry. I want to see the look on her face when she realizes she cannot access a single dime of this stolen money." His eyes moved down the page. He reached the section outlining the Shell LLC's registered mailing address. The specific downtown Seattle P.O. box used to funnel the fraudulent funds. Dominic stopped talking. The sudden silence was absolute. It was not a pause for breath or a momentary lapse in concentration. It was a violent, unnatural halt. I watched as the color rapidly drained from his face, leaving his skin a sickly ashen gray. The sharp predatory confidence that defined his entire persona simply vanished. His hands gripping the edges of the printed paper began to tremble with a minute high-frequency vibration. He did not look up. His eyes remained locked on that single line of text, as if the letters had suddenly rearranged themselves into a foreign language. Dominic. I asked, keeping my voice low and carefully neutral. Is there a problem with the filing? He did not answer. He slowly lowered the document to the marble desk. His breathing became shallow and uneven. He stared at the P.O. Box address. Box 4829. I knew the significance of that address because my forensic accountant had dug into every corner of Savannah's life. But Dominic knew it for a much more intimate reason. Just 1 week ago, his beautiful, devoted wife, Savannah, had brought him a vendor contract to review. She claimed she was organizing an exclusive luxury charity gala. She needed her brilliant husband to verify the legal clauses for an elite event planning service she was supposedly using. The registered mailing address for that vendor contract was Box 4829. He was connecting the dots in real time. The brilliant legal mind that could dismantle corporate empires was currently processing the destruction of his own reality. The shell company holding my stolen money was registered to the exact same P.O. box his wife had brought into their home. Dominic swallowed hard. He reached out with a trembling finger and turned to the final page of the document, the page detailing the sole beneficiary of the offshore trust. I watched him read Savannah's maiden name. The physical reaction was immediate and terrifying. Dominic recoiled from the desk, pushing his chair back with a harsh scraping sound. He stood up abruptly, knocking his gold pen set clattering across the marble. He turned his back to me, bracing his hands against the floor-to-ceiling glass window. He stared out at the Seattle skyline, but I knew he was not seeing the city. He was seeing the lavish dinners, the shared vacations, the loving text messages. He was seeing his entire marriage exposed as a grotesque lie. His chest heaved as he fought for oxygen. The man who made a living destroying other people's lives was currently suffocating on his own ruin. "It is her," he whispered. His voice was ragged, entirely stripped of its usual commanding resonance. The sound barely carried over the ambient hum of the office ventilation. I stood up slowly and walked over to the desk. I looked down at the documents laid out on the black marble. The evidence was irrefutable. I did not offer fake sympathy. I did not pretend to be shocked. "Yes," I said, my voice quiet but firm in the vast office. "It is Savannah." Dominic turned around slowly. He looked completely shattered. The silver at his temples suddenly made him look exhausted rather than distinguished. The realization that he had spent the last 2 weeks enthusiastically designing the financial execution of his own wife was burning behind his dark eyes. He had promised to strip her down to the bone. He had promised to leave her penniless. He looked from the papers to me. His gaze searched my face, looking for any sign of pity or hesitation. He found neither. He only found a mirror reflecting his own profound betrayal. "You knew," he stated. It was not a question. The pieces locked together in his mind. The anonymous files, the redacted names, the aggressive timeline. "You knew exactly who she was when you hired me." "I needed an attorney who would fight for my assets without mercy," I replied, holding his gaze without flinching. "I needed someone who understood exactly what it feels like to have your entire world dismantled by the person you trust most. Liam is my husband, Dominic, and Savannah is your wife. They have been laughing at us for 6 months. They plan to take my money and walk away." Dominic stared at me. The devastation in his eyes slowly began to shift. The shock was receding, replaced by something far more dangerous. The cold, calculating predator was returning to the surface, but this time the aggression was deeply, intensely personal. The humiliation of being played for a fool by his own wife was igniting a terrifying rage. He walked back to the desk. He did not sit down. He placed his hands flat on the marble, leaning over the documents. His knuckles turned white from the pressure. He stared at Savannah's maiden name printed on the trust charter. "She brought me the vendor contract to review," he said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. She sat in our kitchen drinking wine and asked me to protect her legal interests. She used my expertise to ensure the shell company holding your stolen money was legally sound. He looked up at me. The absolute lack of mercy I had originally hired him for was now magnified 100-fold. "I promised you a bloodbath, Paige," he said, his voice steady and cold as ice. "But I was wrong. This is not going to be a bloodbath. This is going to be an absolute massacre. We are going to take everything." The emotional wreckage in the room evaporated instantly, replaced by a chilling clinical vacuum. Dominic straightened his posture, his spine snapping back into its rigid professional alignment. He smoothed the lapels of his charcoal suit, sealing away the betrayed husband and resurrecting the lethal legal executioner. He did not say her name again. Neither did I. The explicit acknowledgement of his wife's infidelity hung in the air for only a fraction of a second before we both silently agreed to bury it beneath a mountain of incoming litigation. We were no longer just attorney and client. We were two apex predators who had just locked onto the exact same scent. Dominic gathered the printed documents from the marble desk, tapping their edges together with sharp, precise movements. He slipped them into a thick black leather folder. "We need to initiate a full financial fumigation," he said, his voice completely devoid of any human warmth. "Parasites are notoriously difficult to dislodge once they attach themselves to a host's resources. They dig in deep, they hide in the dark. You have to cut off their oxygen supply entirely before you expose them to the light." I watched his dark eyes flash with focused intent. "I agree completely, Dominic," I replied, my tone mirroring his absolute zero temperature. "You cannot negotiate with a parasite. You can only eradicate it. We need to clean house entirely." He nodded, a tight, predatory smile touching the corners of his mouth. "The ex parte motion will be filed the moment the courthouse opens. The asset freeze will lock down the primary accounts, the shell company, and the offshore trust simultaneously. I am also drafting a secondary motion for an emergency forensic audit of every vendor contract associated with that P.O. box. We are going to sanitize the entire network. If there is a single dime of your marital capital sitting in an account she thinks is hers, it will be frozen indefinitely. We will completely sever the supply line." I stood up, smoothing the fabric of my skirt. "Liam believes the equity extraction paperwork is being drafted today. He expects a clean transfer by the end of the week so we can close on his dream house." "Let him expect it," Dominic replied, stepping around the heavy marble desk. "Let him plan his future. Let him pick out the fixtures and the paint colors for his new life. The higher they climb, the more devastating the impact when the ground simply disappears beneath their feet. I will send you the finalized injunctions for your signature tonight via the secure portal. Keep playing your part." I walked toward the heavy glass door, feeling the absolute weight of the pact we had just forged. It was a silent, deadly agreement bound by mutual devastation and a shared appetite for absolute ruin. "Have a productive afternoon, Dominic." I stepped out of the corner office and navigated the glass corridors of the law firm. The perfectly postured assistant did not even look up from her monitor as I passed. I took the private elevator down to the ground floor and pushed through the heavy revolving doors onto the Seattle streets. The bitter wind whipped off the Puget Sound, carrying the sharp, stinging scent of rain and salt water. The city was a blur of gray concrete and neon taillights, a sprawling vertical maze of ambition and greed. I pulled my coat tightly around my shoulders, stepping into the rapid flow of pedestrians. The frantic energy of the downtown grid perfectly matched the electric current humming through my own veins. I felt no sorrow. I felt no heartbreak. The trap was officially armed, and the timer was relentlessly ticking down to 0. I walked 3 blocks to my parked SUV, my mind automatically categorizing the next tactical maneuvers. Liam would be expecting me to play the compliant, trusting wife the moment I walked through our front door. He would be eager to finalize the agency buyout, pretending it was a joint financial decision for our future family. I needed to keep him placated and comfortable for exactly 48 more hours, until Dominic's injunction slammed into the banking network and severed his financial arteries. I unlocked the car and slid into the driver's seat. The leather was freezing against my skin, Before I could reach for the ignition button, my phone vibrated in the center console cup holder. The screen illuminated brightly in the dim cabin, displaying a new text message from Savannah. Hey, gorgeous. Jasmine told me all about the dinner last night. I am so incredibly happy for you and Liam. A new house and a baby. You guys are literal goals. Let us grab drinks tomorrow to celebrate. My treat. I stared at the glowing text. The sheer sociopathic audacity required to send that message was almost a form of dark art. She was sleeping in my bed, stealing my capital, and enthusiastically offering to buy me a celebratory drink with my own stolen cash. She was reveling in her perceived dominance, completely oblivious to the fact that she was actively provoking a professional crisis director. Furthermore, she had no idea that her own husband was currently preparing to legally disembowel her. I typed my response with steady, deliberate keystrokes. Thank you, Savannah. You are the absolute best. I would love to get together. Tomorrow is packed with agency strategy meetings, but let us plan for Friday evening. The landscape is going to look completely different by then. I hit send and tossed the phone casually onto the passenger seat. I started the engine, the deep rumble of the motor vibrating up through the floorboards. I merged into the heavy Seattle traffic, navigating the slick, congested streets with effortless precision. The rain began to fall in heavy sheets, blurring the city lights into long streaks of crimson and white against the windshield. My phone vibrated a second time. Another message flashing across the screen, this time from Liam. Just checked in with the real estate broker. The house is still on the market, but we need to move fast. Get that equity paperwork signed tonight so we can make a dominant all-cash offer tomorrow. Cannot wait to start our new life together, beautiful. I did not bother replying to him. I pressed my foot down harder on the accelerator, feeling the SUV surge forward through the driving storm. They were both living in a beautiful, fragile glass house built entirely on a foundation of my stolen capital, and Dominic and I were currently holding the sledgehammers. The impending destruction was going to be an absolute masterpiece. I drove back toward the wealthy suburbs, leaving the towering skyscrapers behind me. I was heading straight back into the heart of the illusion, fully prepared to smile, right up until the moment it all burned to the ground. The next morning, reality fractured. My phone began vibrating violently against the marble nightstand at 6 in the morning. I reached for it, blindly squinting against the harsh glare of the screen. I had 27 missed calls from Evan, my agency co-director, and over 100 unread messages lighting up our corporate communication channels. I slipped out of bed, leaving Liam snoring softly into his pillow, and walked out to the living room of our luxury apartment. I answered Evan's 28th call. Paige, you need to get online right now. Evan practically shouted, his voice tight with panic. We are under a coordinated attack. It is everywhere. I opened my laptop, resting it on the kitchen island. What are you talking about, Evan? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Look at the industry gossip blogs. Look at the primary KOC accounts on Instagram and TikTok. I opened my browser, and the sheer scale of the assault washed over me. Savannah was striking first. She possessed an elite network of key opinion consumers, high-level influencers, who disguised paid corporate hit jobs as organic grassroots opinions. She had weaponized them overnight. The digital landscape was littered with anonymous blind items and highly orchestrated whisper campaigns, completely tearing my public relations agency apart. The posts were vicious and meticulously targeted. They alleged toxic workplace practices, gross financial mismanagement, and fraudulent billing applied to our top-tier clients. Several viral videos featured anonymous former employees claiming my agency was on the verge of total insolvency. It was a digital firing squad designed to trigger mass panic among our corporate partners. Savannah was using her influence to artificially crater my business valuation, hoping to force me into a desperate fire sale of my equity. We are already getting emails from our anchor clients. Evan continued, his breathing heavy. Technova and Apex Solutions are both threatening to pause their retainers pending a full audit of our billing practices. They are spooked, Paige. This is a highly sophisticated smear campaign. Someone is trying to destroy our reputation. I stared at the screen, reading the captions. The syntax, the specific phrasing, the subtle, passive-aggressive vocabulary. I recognized the digital fingerprints immediately. Savannah was panicking. She likely sensed that Liam was moving too slowly with the equity extraction and decided to force my hand by creating an artificial corporate crisis. Do not panic, Evan. I commanded my crisis management training, instantly overriding the shock. Draft a blanket denial statement immediately. Categorize the allegations as a coordinated cyber smear campaign by a competitor. Tell Technova and Apex that we welcome any audit and will open our books today. Transparency is our shield. Do not let them smell fear. I hung up the phone and stood alone in the quiet apartment, the glow of the laptop illuminating my face. The sheer malice of Savannah's attack was breathtaking. She was not just trying to steal my husband and my money, she was trying to obliterate my life's work. Are you okay? A deep voice broke the silence. I turned to see Liam standing in the hallway wearing his silk robe. He walked toward the kitchen island, his brow furrowed in a mask of perfect husbandly concern. I watched him approach, analyzing his micro-expressions. He knew. He absolutely knew what Savannah was doing. They had orchestrated this together to apply maximum psychological pressure. I let my shoulders slump, deliberately projecting overwhelming vulnerability. I looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. We are under attack, Liam. Someone is running a massive smear campaign against the agency. Clients are threatening to pull their retainers. We could be facing defamation lawsuits by the end of the week. Liam rushed forward, wrapping his arms around me, pulling me into his chest. He stroked my hair, playing the role of the protective savior with Oscar-winning dedication. I rested my cheek against his silk robe, listening to his steady heartbeat, mentally marveling at his absolute depravity. Paige, this is terrible, he murmured, his voice thick with fake sympathy. I told you that industry was vicious. You work too hard for these people, and this is how they treat you. I pulled back slightly, looking up at him. Evan is trying to manage the fallout, but if our anchor clients walk, the agency could face severe financial liability. I do not know what to do, Liam. Liam sighed heavily, running his hands down my arms. He looked into my eyes, projecting a deep, serious gravity. We need to be smart about this, Paige. If the agency is facing insolvency, or worse, if you are targeted personally by corporate lawsuits, we need to completely firewall our personal assets. We cannot let your business liability destroy our future. I blinked, feigning confusion. What do you mean? He stepped back, leaning against the marble counter. He crossed his arms, looking like a man forced to make a difficult but necessary decision to protect his family. I was speaking with my wealth manager this morning about the equity transfer. Given this sudden PR crisis, we need to take immediate preventative measures. If your agency gets sued, they could come after our apartment. They could come after our joint accounts. He paused, letting the manufactured threat hang in the air. The gaslighting was so dense it was practically suffocating. He was using a crisis he and his mistress had created to terrify me into surrendering my last remaining physical asset. We need to transfer the deed of this apartment entirely into my name, he stated, his voice calm and reasonable. It is a standard protective maneuver called a quitclaim deed. If the property is solely in my name, your agency creditors cannot touch it. It shields our home from your professional liabilities. I already had my attorney draft the paperwork. You just need to sign it this morning. I stared at him, letting a look of immense relief wash over my features. The sheer, unadulterated greed radiating from him was spectacular. He wanted it all. The offshore cash, the extracted agency equity, and now the multi-million-dollar downtown apartment. He was trying to strip me legally naked while convincing me he was doing me a favor. Liam. That makes perfect sense, I breathed, stepping back into his arms and hugging him tightly. You are always so smart about these things. I was so terrified we were going to lose our home. Thank you for protecting us. He kissed the top of my head, a smug, victorious smile spreading across his face. That is what I am here for, beautiful. I will always protect what is ours. Just sign the paperwork and let me handle the rest. I closed my eyes, resting my face against his shoulder. The trap Dominic and I had armed was no longer just waiting. Liam had just happily tied the noose around his own neck. I would sign his worthless quitclaim deed. I would let him believe he had outsmarted me. I would let him claim his hollow victory, because by the time Dominic filed the injunctions tomorrow morning, the quitclaim deed would be frozen along with every other fraudulent asset. I smiled against the cool silk of Liam's robe. He wanted to play the savior. He was about to become the sacrifice. I pulled back from the cool silk of his robe, wiping a carefully manufactured tear from my eye. I looked up at him, projecting absolute surrender. "Show me the paperwork, Liam. I will sign it right now. I just want this nightmare to be over." He smiled, a tight, comforting expression that masked his overwhelming greed. He led me to the kitchen island where a stack of legal documents lay waiting next to his laptop. He uncapped a heavy silver pen and placed it in my hand, guiding my fingers to the signature line of the quitclaim deed. I let my hand tremble slightly as I pressed the ink to the paper, signing away my legal right to our luxury apartment. Liam exhaled a long breath of satisfaction as he slid the signed document into a manila envelope. "You did the right thing, Paige. You are safe now. I am going to pour us a drink to calm your nerves." I nodded weakly and excused myself to the master bedroom, claiming I needed to wash my face. The moment the door clicked shut, my fragile demeanor vanished. I walked straight to my walk-in closet and reached into the hidden pocket of my travel duffel. I retrieved a digital micro recorder. It was a high-end piece of audio equipment I typically used for media training and crisis logging with executive clients. It was no larger than a flash drive. I clicked the record button, checking the tiny red indicator light before slipping it discreetly into the deep pocket of my cashmere cardigan. I walked back out to the living room. Liam was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows holding 2 crystal tumblers of expensive scotch. He handed one to me. He was practically vibrating with the adrenaline of his successful heist. I sank onto the velvet sofa, curling my legs beneath me to appear as small and defeated as possible. I took a slow sip of the burning liquid, staring blankly at the glass. "I just do not understand how it happened so fast," I murmured, my voice cracking perfectly. "The influencers coordinated the attack within hours. It was a digital firing squad. My entire professional reputation is ruined, Liam. Why would they target me?" Liam took a heavy swallow of his scotch. He walked over and sat beside me, draping his arm around my shoulders. He was drunk on his own ego, entirely convinced he was the smartest man in the room. He believed he had successfully broken a top-tier crisis manager. "People in your industry are too gullible, Paige," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "You focus too much on the work and not enough on the underlying mechanisms of power. You are never going to walk away from that agency on your own. You were obsessed. You needed a push to see the bigger picture." I let my head rest against his shoulder, keeping the microphone in my pocket perfectly angled toward his voice. "A push?" I asked softly. "What are you saying?" He chuckled, a dark, arrogant sound. He took another drink, the alcohol lowering his remaining inhibitions. He wanted to brag. He wanted to claim credit for his perceived brilliance. "You are too trusting, Paige. Savannah has elite contacts in the digital marketing space. She knows exactly how to manipulate the algorithm and deploy influencer networks. We coordinated the smear campaign together." I stiffened in his arms, channeling genuine shock into my performance. "Savannah helped you attack my agency. Why would she do that to me?" "Because we had to make you see reason," he stated flatly, his voice capturing beautifully on the digital track. "You were dragging your feet with the equity extraction. We needed you to surrender the agency assets and hand over the house deed before the market shifted. It was the only way to force your hand quickly. We created the crisis so you would willingly liquidate. I did it to save our financial future from your stubbornness." The absolute depravity of his confession echoed in the quiet room. He had just verbally admitted to conspiring with his mistress to launch a fraudulent defamation campaign against my business for the explicit purpose of financial extortion. It was a textbook criminal conspiracy, and I had every single syllable captured in high-definition audio. I buried my face in my hands, letting out a quiet sob. "You did what you had to do," I whispered, my voice muffled by my fingers. "You are right, Liam. I was too stubborn." He rubbed my back triumphantly. "Exactly. Now we can finally move forward." Liam finished his drink and headed to the master bedroom, completely satisfied with his night's work. He fell asleep within minutes, his breathing deep and even. I remained on the living room sofa in the dark. I pulled the micro recorder from my pocket and connected it to my laptop. In complete silence, I uploaded the encrypted audio file directly to Dominic's secure server. I typed a brief message attaching the file. Audio evidence of coordinated corporate sabotage and financial extortion. Add it to the injunction. I closed the server window and leaned back against the cushions. The adrenaline was slowly leaving my system, replaced by a cold, mechanical focus. I picked up my phone and opened Instagram, clicking over to my anonymous burner account. I navigated to Savannah's profile. She had just posted a new update. The image loaded on my screen. It was a high-resolution professional photograph of Savannah sitting at a candlelit table in a five-star restaurant. She looked radiant, her blonde hair falling perfectly over her shoulders, but my eyes immediately locked onto her chest. Resting against her collarbone was a breathtaking diamond tennis necklace. It was a highly specific custom piece from an elite jeweler in London. I knew the exact value of that necklace because my forensic accountant had flagged a wire transfer for $50,000 drained from my joint account exactly 2 weeks ago. I stared at the stolen diamonds glittering around her neck. Then my eyes drifted down to the caption typed beneath the photo. Awaiting a little miracle. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. A little miracle. A pregnancy reveal. Savannah was not just planning to steal my husband and my money to fund her luxury lifestyle. She was securing her permanent financial anchor. She was carrying Liam's child. The profound betrayal settled over me, replacing the lingering shock with a terrifying absolute clarity. The game of financial chess was over. The annihilation just became a matter of survival. The word miracle burned itself into my retinas. The sheer scale of the betrayal expanded from financial ruin into biological replacement. Savannah was pregnant. I closed the laptop, the soft click echoing in the dark apartment. The crisis manager in me immediately compartmentalized the shock. A child altered the legal landscape, but it did not change the mission. It only guaranteed that the impending destruction needed to be absolute. I did not confront Liam the next morning. I played the exhausted, terrified wife perfectly, letting him leave for the office believing he held all the cards. I spent the next 2 days finalizing the injunctions with Dominic, securing the audio file, and waiting for the weekend. Saturday arrived, bathed in mocking golden sunlight. Jasmine and Trey were hosting their annual summer barbecue at their sprawling suburban estate. It was the perfect stage for a performance, and I knew Liam and Savannah were planning a masterpiece. I dressed meticulously, choosing a white silk sundress that projected effortless innocence. Liam drove us to the suburbs, his hand resting comfortably on my knee, playing the devoted husband, while text alerts from his mistress likely buzzed silently in his pocket. The air inside the luxury SUV was thick with unspoken lies, but I kept my gaze fixed on the passing trees, my mind categorizing the final steps of my exit strategy. Jasmine and Trey's backyard was a masterpiece of affluent landscaping. A massive stone patio wrapped around a heated infinity pool overlooking manicured lawns that rolled down to a private lake. A catered staff circulated with silver trays of champagne and skewers of grilled seafood. The smell of expensive charcoal and blooming jasmine filled the air. The elite circle of our social and professional lives was gathered here, laughing and drinking, completely oblivious to the toxic current flowing beneath the surface. I greeted Jasmine, kissing her cheek and handing over an expensive bottle of Pinot Noir. She smiled brightly, completely unaware that her pristine garden party was about to become ground zero for a catastrophic domestic implosion. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water and surveyed the lawn. I spotted Savannah holding court near the edge of the stone patio. She wore a flowing floral maternity dress that hinted heavily at the secret she was ready to deploy. Around her neck glittered the $50,000 diamond tennis necklace Liam had bought her with my stolen agency funds. The sheer sociopathic audacity of wearing it to a party I was attending was staggering. She saw me approach and offered a sickeningly sweet wave. Liam was stationed strategically a few yards away, chatting with Trey but keeping his eyes locked on our trajectory. They had a plan. I could read the predatory synchronization in their body language. The trap was set, and I was walking directly into it. I walked toward Savannah, plastering a serene smile on my face. I held my water glass loosely, keeping my hands visible and non-threatening. Savannah stepped away from the main group of guests, moving closer to the sharp drop-off where the stone patio met the sloped lawn. She beckoned me over, holding a large crystal goblet filled to the brim with dark red wine. The placement was entirely deliberate. The audience was primed. Page Savannah purred loudly enough for the nearest guest to hear. "I am so glad you are here. We need to talk." I stopped 2 feet away from her, ensuring a safe physical distance. "What is on your mind, Savannah?" I asked, keeping my tone perfectly conversational. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. Her eyes flashed with a sudden manufactured panic. She looked past me, locking eyes with Liam. That was the signal. In one fluid, violent motion, Savannah raised her crystal goblet and tipped it backward. The dark red liquid splashed over her own chest, staining the pristine floral fabric like fresh blood. Before I could even register the bizarre self-sabotage, she let out a piercing, blood-curdling scream. She threw her weight backward, deliberately collapsing onto the hard stone patio. The crystal goblet shattered against the ground, sending sharp shards of glass flying across the expensive pavers. She curled into a fetal position, clutching her stomach and sobbing hysterically. The entire party froze. The ambient music seemed to cut out entirely. Dozens of heads turned simultaneously toward the patio edge. Liam moved with explosive speed. He sprinted across the lawn, shoving past terrified guests, and dropped to his knees beside Savannah. He wrapped his arms around her, projecting absolute terror and protective fury. "What did you do?" Liam roared, his voice booming across the silent backyard. He pointed a trembling finger directly at my face. "Are you insane, Paige? Look at what you did to her." Guests began to murmur, stepping closer. Jasmine rushed forward, covering her mouth in shock. "I did not touch her," I stated clearly, keeping my hands raised and empty. She poured the wine on herself and fell. "Do not lie to me," Liam shouted, his face turning a convincing shade of furious red. He looked around at the gathered crowd, playing to his audience perfectly. "My wife is completely unhinged. She has been having a psychological breakdown all week. She found out Savannah is pregnant and she snapped." He pulled Savannah closer to his chest, smoothing her hair, as she wailed dramatically, holding her stomach. "Savannah is carrying my child. We were going to tell you today, Paige, but you could not handle the truth. You tried to hurt a pregnant woman. You tried to hurt my baby." The crowd erupted into horrified gasps. Whispers of condemnation rippled through our social circle. Friends I had known for years looked at me with outright disgust. They saw a jealous, barren wife attacking her pregnant best friend out of pure malicious spite. It was a masterful frame job. Liam and Savannah had successfully cast me as the unstable, violent villain, creating the ultimate public justification for him to leave me, while shielding their affair behind a wall of manufactured victimhood. My crisis PR brain was already analyzing the angles. It was a classic smear and deflect maneuver. Create a spectacle so loud that the truth gets buried under the noise. I stood alone in the center of the patio, surrounded by broken glass and red wine. I did not scream. I did not defend myself. I did not give them the hysterical reaction they desperately needed to complete their narrative. I simply looked down at Savannah, who was peeking at me through her tears, a triumphant glint in her eyes. I looked at Liam, who was playing the aggrieved, protective father flawlessly. I let them have the stage. I let them bask in their public victory. Because tomorrow morning Dominic was unleashing hell, and this entire theatrical production was going to burn to ash. The silence following Liam's accusation shattered instantly. Chaos erupted across the stone patio. Jasmine broke through the circle of paralyzed guests, her face contorted with absolute horror and rage. She rushed to Savannah's side, dropping to her knees, ruining her designer silk trousers in the puddle of spilled wine. She wrapped her arms protectively around Savannah's shaking shoulders. "How could you do this, Paige?" Jasmine screamed, her voice shrill and entirely devoid of the polished elegance she usually projected. "She is pregnant. She is carrying a child. You are a monster." I watched Jasmine buy into the manipulation completely. Her outrage was genuine. She was the perfect, unwitting pawn in their stage play. The surrounding guests recoiled, taking collective steps backward. The physical distance they put between themselves and me was a tangible manifestation of my sudden social excommunication. Women I had shared expensive lunches with, men whose corporate accounts I managed, they all looked at me with undisguised revulsion. In less than 60 seconds, I had been transformed from a respected peer into a violent, unstable pariah. I stood perfectly still. My hands remained flat against my sides. My face was a mask of cold, clinical observation. Crisis management dictates that when an adversary controls the narrative velocity, any emotional reaction serves only as fuel for their fire. Denials sound like guilt. Anger looks like proof. Silence is the only impenetrable armor. Liam seized upon my silence, reading it as defeat. He gently handed Savannah over to Jasmine's care and stood up, squaring his shoulders. He looked around at the affluent crowd, ensuring he had every single eye locked onto him. He reached into the pocket of his tailored slacks and pulled out his phone. "I am so sorry, everyone," Liam announced, his voice shaking with perfectly modulated sorrow. "I never wanted our private struggles to become a public burden, but Paige has been spiraling for weeks. Her agency is collapsing under fraud allegations, and the stress has completely broken her. She is dangerous. I cannot protect Savannah or my unborn child on my own anymore." He raised the phone, tapping the screen with deliberate, exaggerated movements. "I have to call the police. I need to establish a documented record of this assault before she hurts someone else." The tactical brilliance of his maneuver was undeniable. I watched him dial, recognizing the exact legal architecture of his trap. He did not just want to humiliate me, he wanted to destroy me in family court. A documented police report citing domestic violence and assault on a pregnant woman would be the ultimate kill shot. It would trigger the morality and liability clauses in every single one of my corporate PR contracts, instantly bankrupting my firm. It would give him absolute leverage in the divorce proceedings, allowing him to paint me as an unstable aggressor and strip me of any remaining assets. He was not just calling the police. He was summoning my legal executioners. "Please, Liam, do not do it!" Savannah wailed from the ground, clutching Jasmine's arm. "She needs help, not jail. Please just let her go." Her plea was a masterstroke of reverse psychology. By begging for my mercy, she elevated her own victimhood and cemented my status as the villain. It guaranteed that the crowd would support Liam's decision to involve law enforcement. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the guests. A tech CEO I had known for 5 years nodded grimly at Liam, urging him to make the call. "I have no choice," Savannah, Liam said, his voice heavy with manufactured regret. "She crossed a line today. She has to be held accountable." I remained rooted to the spot. The late afternoon sun beat down on the patio, catching the sparkling shards of broken crystal scattered at my feet. My pulse was steady. I was mentally calculating the arrival time of the local police, the bail process, the booking procedures. I was fully prepared to let them handcuff me. I was fully prepared to sit in a holding cell, because the moment I surrendered my hidden micro-recorder to my attorney, this entire fabricated assault would instantly transform into a felony conspiracy charge for Liam and Savannah. I just needed to let him complete the call. I needed him to commit the crime of filing a false police report. Liam held the phone in front of him, his thumb hovering dramatically over the green call button. He locked eyes with me. He wanted to see fear. He wanted to see me beg. He wanted me to fall to my knees in front of our entire social circle and plead for my reputation. I gave him nothing. I stared back at him with the cold, dead eyes of an apex predator, waiting for its prey to step into the snare. He set his jaw, pressing his thumb down toward the screen. Before his skin could make contact, the heavy sliding glass doors of the main house hissed open. The sound was sharp, cutting through the tension on the patio like a blade. Trey walked out onto the stone pavers. He did not look at the broken glass. He did not look at his wife kneeling in the spilled wine. He did not look at Savannah sobbing on the ground. He walked with a slow, rigid mechanical stiffness, his eyes glued entirely to the large digital tablet clutched in his hands. Trey was notoriously obsessed with his smart home integration. He had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars wiring every square inch of his estate with high-definition security cameras, motion sensors, and environmental controls. His control room was his sanctuary. He recorded everything, archiving the footage on a private cloud server simply because he had the technological capability to do so. He stopped at the edge of the patio. The screen of the tablet cast a pale blue glow across his face. He looked up slowly, his gaze bypassing Liam and fixing directly on Savannah. The silence in the backyard became absolute. Trey did not shout. He did not panic. He simply held the tablet out, pointing the screen toward the crowd. "Wait, Liam," Trey said, his voice echoing strangely in the quiet air. "Do not call the police yet. You all need to see this." Trey did not wait for permission or consensus. He ignored Liam's outstretched hand and walked straight past Jasmine's kneeling form. He marched directly toward the outdoor kitchen pavilion, where a massive 85-inch waterproof flat screen was mounted beneath the custom cedar pergola. With two sharp taps on his tablet, the ambient jazz music echoing from the hidden garden speakers cut off completely. The sudden silence was deafening. The screen flickered, shifting instantly from a rotating gallery of landscape photography to a live security feed. Trey swiped his finger across the tablet, loading a specific archived file from exactly 3 minutes ago. He cast the video directly to the massive outdoor monitor. The high-definition 4K resolution illuminated the patio with brutal clarity. The camera angle was positioned discreetly under the roofline, providing a wide, unobstructed view of the entire stone terrace and the sloped lawn beyond. Trey hit play. Every guest in the backyard edged closer, their eyes glued to the screen. The footage showed me walking calmly towards Savannah. It showed me stopping a good 10 feet away, my hands completely visible holding a glass of sparkling water. The distance between us was indisputable. There was no physical contact. There was no aggressive posture. I was standing perfectly still. Then Trey rewound the footage and played it again at half speed. The digital playback captured the truth with agonizing precision. The crowd watched in dead silence as Savannah's eyes darted left and right, checking her sightlines. The high-resolution lens caught the exact fraction of a second where she locked eyes with Liam across the lawn, confirming he was in position. Then the screen displayed the deliberate, calculated flick of her wrist. Savannah tipped the crystal goblet backward, pouring the dark red wine directly down the front of her floral maternity dress. The slow-motion footage was damning. It showed her meticulously tossing the empty glass onto the stone pavers, ensuring it shattered away from her body. It captured the slow, controlled mechanics of her lowering herself safely to the ground, protecting her knees, before she threw her head back and opened her mouth to unleash her hysterical scream. A collective gasp ripped through the affluent crowd. The air was sucked out of the backyard. The same people who had looked at me with unadulterated revulsion moments ago now turned their unified disgust toward the couple on the ground. The social execution was instantaneous. Jasmine slowly stood up. She looked down at her ruined silk trousers stained with the wine from the patio stones, and then stared at Savannah. Jasmine's expression twisted from maternal concern to pure molten fury. She realized she had been used as a prop in a fraudulent stage play. She took 3 large steps backward, as if Savannah were violently radioactive. Liam froze. His phone, still dialed and ready to connect to emergency dispatch, hung uselessly in his trembling hand. He stared up at the giant screen, the color draining rapidly from his face. His grand legal trap had just been dismantled and broadcast in extremely high definition to the most powerful people in his professional and social network. Trey walked slowly toward him. Trey was a notoriously private man, a wealth manager who operated entirely in the shadows and despised public drama. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried no warmth and no anger. It was glacial. "Do not bring this trash into my house," Trey said, staring directly into Liam's eyes with icy disgust. The absolute finality of the statement hung in the air. It was an eviction from their world. Savannah realized the sheer magnitude of her failure instantly. The extortion plot had not just collapsed, it had snapped shut on her own neck. She was exposed as a calculating predator in front of the city's elite. The embarrassment was absolute. Her survival instinct kicked into overdrive. She needed an immediate exit strategy that prevented anyone from asking questions she could not answer. She let out a sharp, agonizing wail, grabbing her lower abdomen. She doubled over her face, contorting into a fresh mask of extreme physical agony. "Liam, the baby," she shrieked, her voice echoing across the silent lawn. "My stomach. The stress of this attack is hurting the baby. You need to get me to a hospital right now." Liam, desperate for any excuse to flee the humiliating spotlight, hauled her to her feet. He wrapped his arm around her waist, half dragging and half carrying her across the manicured grass toward the side gate leading to the driveway. He did not look back. He did not offer an apology to his hosts or an explanation to his peers. They were in full retreat, a disgraced couple fleeing the scene of their own spectacular crime. I stood perfectly still on the patio watching them retreat. I did not move to intercept them. I did not demand an apology. My crisis management instincts, honed by years of analyzing body language and identifying micro-expressions, automatically locked onto Savannah's retreating figure. I watched the precise mechanics of her supposed agony. When a woman experiences sudden, severe abdominal pain, especially a sudden trauma threatening a pregnancy, the human body reacts involuntarily. The core contracts violently. The knees buckle under the sudden loss of stability. The posture instinctively curls inward, folding the body to protect the womb. Savannah was screaming hysterically, but her stride across the lawn was remarkably even. She was bending forward at the waist, but her abdominal muscles were completely relaxed. Her hands were clutching her stomach, but she was actively using her core strength to maintain her perfect balance on the uneven grass in designer heels. I narrowed my eyes, processing the visual data with cold clinical detachment. The way she shifted her weight to navigate the stone path. The total lack of genuine physiological distress signals. It was a performance, just like the spilled wine, just like the orchestrated fall. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train aligning every disjointed piece of the puzzle. The sudden $50,000 diamond necklace. The dramatic public announcement designed to force a rapid settlement. The desperate rush to extract my agency equity and secure the apartment deed before I could properly audit our accounts. It was a fabricated timeline. Savannah's physical reactions to the severe abdominal pain were completely wrong. She was not just faking the stomach cramps to escape the humiliation of the barbecue. She was faking the entire pregnancy. The realization clicked into place, cold and sharp. Savannah was faking the entire pregnancy. I did not wait for Jasmine or Trey to offer their apologies or process the shock of the patio confrontation. I slipped out through the side gate just seconds after Liam's taillights disappeared down the long, winding driveway. I slid into the driver's seat of my own sedan, my mind operating with the ruthless precision of a military tactician. I kept a safe 2-car distance between my vehicle and Liam's luxury SUV. He was driving erratically, tearing through the affluent suburban streets toward the city's medical district. He was panicked, entirely consumed by the illusion Savannah was spinning in the passenger seat. I tracked them all the way to the Kensington Women's Clinic, a highly exclusive private facility known for treating politicians and corporate elite. Liam slammed the SUV into the emergency drop-off zone. He sprinted around the hood, carefully helping Savannah out of the car. She was still performing flawlessly, clutching her stomach and limping dramatically toward the sliding glass doors. I parked in the adjacent concrete structure, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I could not just walk into a secure medical facility and demand to see a patient's private files. The federal privacy laws were ironclad. But I was not a concerned relative. I was a top-tier crisis manager, and my entire career was built on trading favors in the shadows. 3 years ago, the Kensington Medical Network faced a catastrophic data breach. A prominent executive's confidential records had been leaked to the press. I was the operative who stepped in, navigated the media, managed the public fallout, and saved their board of directors from devastating federal scrutiny. The chief administrator of the clinic, Dr. Aris Thorne, owed me his career. I pulled out my phone and dialed his private cell number. He answered on the second ring. I told him I needed 5 minutes of his time entirely off the books immediately. I walked through the sleek marble-floored lobby, bypassing the crowded waiting room where Liam was currently pacing and aggressively badgering the front desk receptionist. I slipped down a restricted hallway utilizing the staff access code Aris had just texted to my secure line. The corridors were pristine, smelling of expensive sterile citrus and lined with modern art instead of standard medical posters. I navigated the labyrinth of private suites until I found Eris in his private office, the heavy oak door unlocked and waiting. He looked nervous, tapping a silver pen against his mahogany desk as I closed the door behind me. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I gave him the name Savannah Hayes. I explained that she was currently in exam room 4, claiming a severe pregnancy complication, and I needed to know the absolute truth regarding her medical status. Aris hesitated, citing protocol and ethical boundaries. I leaned forward, resting my hands on his desk, and quietly reminded him of the non-disclosure agreements I still held regarding his network's prior digital vulnerabilities. It was a gentle, polished threat delivered with a perfectly pleasant smile. Aris sighed, running a hand over his face. He turned toward his secure terminal and typed her name into the internal database. His brow furrowed as he scanned the digital records. He clicked through multiple screens before turning the monitor slightly toward me. Savannah Hayes was a registered patient, but not for obstetrics. She had been seen exactly twice in the last 3 years for routine wellness exams and minor cosmetic dermatology referrals. There was no human chorionic gonadotropin blood test on file. There were no prenatal vitamins prescribed. There were no maternal intake forms registered anywhere in the hospital network. "She is not pregnant," Aris stated, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She never has been." I pressed further, my mind calculating the specific timeline of her deception. I asked Eris to check the origin of the ultrasound image she had recently provided to the clinic as part of her intake paperwork earlier that week, the same image she had posted on her anonymous social media account. Iris pulled up her communication logs, opening an email Savannah had sent the front desk. He zoomed in on the high-resolution attached file. To the untrained eye, it looked exactly like a standard sonogram. But Eris adjusted the contrast and brightness on his diagnostic monitor, revealing the digital footprint. In the bottom right corner, partially cropped, but still embedded in the image data, was a faint watermark. It belonged to a novelty website that sold customized fake ultrasound generator software for practical jokes. Savannah had bought the sonogram online for $29. The sheer architectural brilliance of her fraud settled over me. Savannah knew Liam was arrogant, but she also knew he was inherently cautious with his money. To convince him to actively sabotage my public relations agency, drain our joint bank accounts, and attempt to extort the quitclaim deed to our luxury apartment, she needed a ticking clock. A fake pregnancy was the ultimate accelerant. It forced Liam to bypass logic and liquidate our shared assets immediately to secure a future for his fictitious heir before I could discover his affair. Savannah had manipulated his monumental ego and his inherent greed, weaponizing a non-existent child to rush the financial heist. She created the crisis to force his hand, using the fake pregnancy as leverage to guarantee her permanent anchor to his wealth. I thanked Aris, stepping back from the desk. I left his office through the back emergency stairwell, avoiding the lobby completely. I walked out into the cool evening air of the parking garage, the digital proof of Savannah's ultimate lie, securely forwarded to my encrypted server. Liam believed he was protecting his legacy and his future, but he had bankrupted his entire life for a cheap internet prank. The financial extortion plot was unraveling. The public smear campaign had been caught on high-definition camera, and now the biological anchor of their sordid affair was proven to be a complete illusion. I unlocked my car, a genuine, terrifying smile crossing my face. They had tried to break me with lies, but I was holding the absolute truth. The board was set, and the total annihilation was finally ready to commence. I pulled out of the Kensington Clinic parking structure, blending my sedan into the evening city traffic. The streetlights washed over my windshield, illuminating the cold, calculated smile now permanently fixed on my face. A lesser strategist would have driven straight back to our luxury apartment and thrown the fake ultrasound evidence directly in Liam's face. It would have been momentarily satisfying to watch his arrogant expression crumble as he realized Savannah had played him for an absolute fool. But that was a fatal tactical error. Confronting a narcissist with proof of their gullibility only gives them an opportunity to pivot to rewrite their narrative or worse, to destroy the evidence and find a new angle of attack. I was not interested in a dramatic domestic argument. I was engineering an execution. I needed total legal and financial annihilation. I bypassed our shared apartment entirely and drove to a secure co-working space downtown, where I kept a private server locker. The office building was deserted at this hour, smelling of ozone and commercial floor wax. I sat down at a blank terminal and pulled up the encrypted files I had been gathering over the past few weeks. This was the final assembly of my weapon. I transferred the high-resolution image files from Dr. Eris Thorne, clearly showing the novelty website watermark embedded in Savannah's fake sonogram. Next, I downloaded the offshore trust fund bank statements my forensic accountant had successfully traced. The ledgers meticulously detailed the $50,000 Liam had siphoned for Savannah's diamond necklace, alongside the hundreds of thousands they were actively trying to hide from my agency accounts. Finally, I dragged and dropped the pristine digital audio file. Liam's own voice captured in the quiet of our living room, explicitly bragging about coordinating the digital smear campaign and committing financial extortion. I loaded every file onto a heavy encrypted titanium flash drive. I slipped the drive into a thick, unmarked black envelope and sealed it shut. It was a physical manifestation of total leverage. It was nearing midnight when I navigated my car toward the financial district. Dominic lived in a hyper-secure luxury high-rise favored by hedge fund managers and corporate titans. Security was notoriously impenetrable, but my crisis management firm had designed the building's protocol 2 years prior. I knew exactly how the subterranean camera blind spots operated. I bypassed the main entrance and approached the underground resident parking garage. I waited patiently in the shadows of the alley until a sleek Bentley swiped its access card to enter. I slid my sedan smoothly through the descending iron gate right behind it, catching the tail end of the green light. The underground garage was a climate-controlled cavern of polished concrete and high-end automotive engineering. The air smelled faintly of expensive tire rubber and premium detail wax. I moved silently through the dim fluorescent lighting, scanning the assigned VIP spaces. I found it in Sector A. Dominic's immaculate obsidian Porsche Carrera. It sat under a spotlight looking like a predatory shark resting in deep water. I stepped out of my car, my footsteps making no sound on the pristine floor. I walked over to the Porsche and slid the unmarked black envelope securely under the driver's side windshield wiper. It was a ghost drop, no text messages, no digital footprint tracking a late-night rendezvous. Just hard, incontrovertible evidence left waiting for the most ruthless litigator in the city to discover. I retreated to my car, slipped back out through the automated exit gate, and vanished into the night. I drove to a high-end boutique hotel downtown, paying cash for a corner suite under a corporate alias. I did not turn on the lights when I entered the room. I sat in a velvet armchair by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the sleeping city below. The adrenaline that had carried me through the patio confrontation and the hospital infiltration was slowly receding, replaced by a hyper-focused stillness. I had handed over the nuclear codes. Now I just had to wait for the detonation. The digital clock on the nightstand clicked methodically. Midnight passed. Then 1 in the morning. I did not close my eyes. I watched the taillights of distant cars moving like red blood cells through the concrete arteries of the city. I thought about Liam waking up in the morning, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire existence had just been legally dismantled while he slept. He believed he had trapped me in a corner, but he had actually walked willingly into an abyss. At exactly 2 o'clock in the morning, the silence of the hotel room was shattered. My secure burner phone vibrated intensely against the glass top of the side table. The screen illuminated the dark room, casting a stark white glow across my hands. A single blocked caller ID flashed on the display. I picked up the device and pressed it to my ear. I did not offer a greeting, I just waited. The line was completely silent for 3 long seconds. I could hear the faint hum of high-end automotive climate control in the background. Dominic was sitting in his Porsche. He had opened the envelope. He had reviewed the offshore bank statements. He had seen the fake ultrasound watermark. He had listened to every arrogant, criminally incriminating syllable of Liam's recorded confession. When Dominic finally spoke, his voice was completely devoid of emotion. It was not angry. It was not triumphant. It was deadly and precise, carrying the absolute certainty of a predator that had just locked its jaws around the neck of its prey. "Prepare the court filings for tomorrow morning." Dominic stated the words, slicing through the darkness like a scalpel. "We skin them alive." The dawn following Dominic's call was a masterclass in silent legal warfare. By the time the sun broke over the Seattle skyline, every injunction, asset freeze, and heavily documented fraud accusation had been securely filed with the federal court. The legal trap was locked, but the execution required a stage worthy of the crimes committed. That stage was set for exactly 7 o'clock that evening at the grand ballroom of the city's most historic downtown hotel. It was the annual Emerald City Philanthropy Gala, the absolute pinnacle of the social calendar. It was a room packed shoulder to shoulder with tech billionaires, media moguls, and the deeply entrenched elite. It was the exact room where Liam and Savannah intended to plant their flag and solidify their stolen empire. I stepped out of my town car and handed my keys to the valet, letting the cold night air sharpen my focus. I bypassed the red carpet photographers, stepping into the gilded foyer with the posture of a reigning queen. I had chosen a floor-length emerald silk gown with razor-sharp tailoring that left no room for vulnerability. My hair was pulled back into a severe immaculate knot, and my makeup was a flawless armor of cool indifference. My crisis management instincts were dialed to maximum capacity. I knew exactly what I was walking into. I was the unhinged villain of the week. I glided through the heavy mahogany doors and into the grand ballroom. The space was a breathtaking display of opulent wealth. Massive crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden light over dozens of round tables draped in black velvet. Waiters in crisp white tuxedos circulated with silver trays of champagne and caviar. A string quartet played softly over the low roar of hundreds of overlapping conversations. It took me less than 30 seconds to locate my targets. Savannah was holding court near a towering ice sculpture, completely in her element. She had chosen a tight blush pink gown, specifically tailored with strategic ruching just under the bust, designed to artificially emphasize the slight natural curve of her stomach. She stood with one hand resting protectively over her non-existent baby bump, soaking up the fawning attention of 3 different venture capitalists' wives. She was playing the brave, traumatized victim flawlessly. I watched as she offered a delicate, brave smile, accepting their hushed sympathies about the terrible ordeal she had survived at the barbecue. She was weaponizing fake trauma to gain elite social capital, and she was absolutely reveling in the spotlight. A few yards away, Liam was operating at maximum velocity. He held a tumbler of scotch, projecting the aura of a man who owned the entire building. He was aggressively networking with a circle of media investors, pitching his grand vision for the future. He truly believed he had already won. He thought my agency was bankrupt, my reputation was destroyed, and my bank accounts were bleeding into his offshore trusts. He was standing in a room full of apex predators, playing the undisputed king of the world, completely blind to the fact that the ground beneath his feet had already collapsed. I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and stepped deliberately into the light. The reaction was instantaneous. The whispers started at the edge of the room and rippled outward like a shockwave across a still lake. Heads turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The elite circle of Seattle society stared at me with a mixture of morbid curiosity and undisguised shock. They had all heard the rumors. They all believed I was the unstable, violent wife who had assaulted a pregnant woman. They fully expected me to be hiding in shame or locked away in a psychiatric facility. Instead, I was standing in the center of their gala, sipping expensive vintage champagne and smiling with serene, absolute tranquility. I did not flinch. I did not shrink from their stares. I met the eyes of a powerful magazine editor who had condemned me yesterday and offered her a polite, elegant nod. She blinked in stunned confusion and looked away. Liam saw the shift in the room's attention. He turned his gaze, tracking the stares until he locked eyes with me. The color drained from his face, instantly replaced by a dark mottled red of pure, unfiltered rage. His triumphant posture stiffened. This was not part of his script. I was supposed to be neutralized. He set his scotch down on a passing tray with unnecessary force and marched across the ballroom floor. Savannah noticed his sudden movement and followed close behind, her hand securely fastened to her fake bump. The surrounding guests parted for them, watching the impending collision with breathless anticipation. Liam stopped 2 feet in front of me, his voice a low, venomous hiss designed to avoid carrying to the nearby tables. "What the hell are you doing here, Paige? You have no right to show your face in this room after what you did." I took a slow, methodical sip of my champagne, letting the silence stretch just long enough to assert dominance. "I am a platinum sponsor of this foundation, Liam," I replied, my voice perfectly level and entirely unbothered. "My name is on the program. Why would I miss a charity dinner I already paid for?" Savannah shrank behind Liam's shoulder, widening her eyes to project terror for the benefit of the watching crowd. "Liam, please," she whimpered softly. "Make her leave. She is making me anxious. The stress is bad for the baby." I looked directly at Savannah, locking onto her tear-filled eyes. The sheer audacity of her performance was almost impressive. Almost. I allowed a tiny razor-thin smile to touch the corners of my mouth. "You look radiant, Savannah." I purred, my tone laced with a chilling sweetness that made her falter. "Motherhood clearly suits you. Enjoy the glow while it lasts." Liam's jaw clenched so tightly I could hear his teeth grinding. "You are completely delusional," he sneered, stepping closer to physically intimidate me. "You think putting on a nice dress changes the fact that you are finished? Your agency is dead. You have nothing left. If you do not walk out those doors right now, I will have security drag you out." I held my ground, looking up at him with cold, clinical pity. "You are welcome to try, Liam, but I highly recommend you take your seat. You are going to want to be sitting down for the awards ceremony." Before he could respond, the heavy brass chimes rang out across the ballroom, signaling the start of the dinner service. The string quartet faded out, replaced by a booming voice over the public address system asking the guests to take their seats. The tension in the air was suffocating, thick and electric. Liam glared at me for one final second before grabbing Savannah's arm and steering her toward a VIP table near the front of the stage. I walked to my own assigned table, situated perfectly in the center of the room with an unobstructed view of the podium. I sat down, smoothing the silk of my gown over my knees. The ambient lights dimmed, casting the massive ballroom in a dramatic theatrical glow as the master of ceremonies stepped up to the microphone. The room quieted, the elite crowd settling in for a night of speeches and philanthropy, completely unaware that the real main event was about to begin. The trap was fully armed, and the countdown had just hit 0. The master of ceremonies, a polished local television anchor with a booming baritone, leaned into the microphone. His voice echoed through the cavernous grand ballroom, cutting through the clinking of crystal and silver. He offered the standard platitudes about charity and community before pivoting gracefully to the most anticipated moment of the gala. He announced the presentation of the Platinum Visionary Award, honoring a couple whose extraordinary recent financial pledges had supposedly single-handedly secured the Foundation's new pediatric research initiative. He spoke with rehearsed reverence about their dedication to the future and their resilience in the face of sudden public hardships. He called Liam and Savannah to the stage. The applause was deafening, rolling across the velvet-draped tables in a wave of elite approval. Liam stood immediately, buttoning his bespoke tuxedo jacket with practiced arrogance. He projected the absolute certainty of a man who believed he had successfully purchased his redemption. He placed a protective hand on Savannah's lower back, guiding her toward the carpeted stairs leading to the podium. He believed the massive check he had written using stolen funds would wash away the patio scandal and crown him the king of Seattle society. Savannah played her part with sickening perfection. She moved slowly, climbing the steps with a delicate, manufactured fragility. She clutched the heavy glass trophy the master of ceremonies handed her, holding it close to her chest. She adjusted the microphone, her eyes scanning the sea of wealthy faces looking up at her. She offered a brave, watery smile. When she spoke, her voice trembled with perfectly calibrated emotion. She thanked the foundation board. She thanked Liam, calling him her rock and her protector. Then she took a deep breath, letting a single tear slip down her cheek. She rested her hand gently on the ruched silk, covering her stomach, emphasizing the fake curve she had so carefully constructed. We have realized recently just how fragile and precious new life truly is. Savannah murmured, her voice echoing through the silent, attentive room. Walking through fire teaches you what really matters. Liam and I have faced unimaginable stress this week. We faced darkness. But standing here tonight looking out at all of you, we are just so incredibly grateful for this new blessing growing inside me. This award belongs to our future. The crowd was captivated. Several venture capitalist wives at the front tables who had been sneering at my arrival earlier actively dabbed their eyes with linen napkins. It was a flawless, theatrical production designed to cement their status as the ultimate survivors of my supposed wrath. Savannah paused, letting the emotional weight settle over the audience. She turned slightly, gesturing toward the AV booth, suspended high above the ballroom floor. "We put together a short presentation," Savannah announced, recovering her bright smile, "a vision of what the new pediatric wing will look like." The ballroom lights plunged into total darkness. I sat perfectly still at my center table, taking a slow sip of my vintage champagne. Savannah believed she was controlling the narrative, but my crisis management firm handled the digital infrastructure for the entire event production company. Intercepting their media queue had required exactly 3 lines of encrypted code executed from my hotel room hours ago. Dominic had done his job with the courts. I was doing mine with the public. The massive 80-foot projector screen dominating the wall behind the stage flickered to life, but it did not show architectural renderings or smiling children. Instead, a stark, blindingly white document filled the massive screen. The seal of the United States District Court glowed in high definition. The text was magnified to such an extreme scale that even the guests seated at the furthest tables in the back could read every single word. It was the federal court injunction. The bold, stark lettering at the top read "Emergency Asset Freeze and Seizure." The document aggressively detailed Liam's full legal name, his hidden offshore shell companies, and the specific routing numbers for his Cayman Island trusts. A highlighted red box at the bottom of the projection displayed the total available liquidity across all his seized accounts. It was a flat, absolute zero. The funds he promised to the charity tonight were completely frozen. A strange, confused murmur rippled through the front rows. Liam squinted, stepping closer to the projection screen, his brow furrowed. He clearly thought the production team had made a catastrophic technical error loading the wrong file. He raised his hand to signal the booth to cut the feed. Before he could speak, the slide shifted. The screen split into a massive side-by-side comparison. On the left side was the exact high-resolution ultrasound image Savannah had plastered across her anonymous social media accounts to destroy my reputation. The image she had used to force Liam to liquidate his assets. On the right side of the screen was a pristine digital receipt from a website called jokeandgag.com. The purchase order was blown up to monumental proportions. It clearly listed one customized digital prank sonogram generator. The billing name on the credit card receipt was Savannah Hayes. The total purchase price was $29.99. Below the receipt, a bright crimson circle appeared on the screen, magnifying the bottom right corner of both images. The digital overlay highlighted the exact matching watermark, proving undeniably that the miraculous new life Savannah was currently clutching her stomach over was nothing more than a cheap internet joke. The transition from polite confusion to absolute seismic shock was instantaneous. The elite crowd fell into a stunned, deafening silence. The silence was so profound, so heavy and thick, that it seemed to suck the oxygen out of the massive ballroom. Hundreds of the most powerful people in the city stopped breathing simultaneously. The venture capitalist wives who had been crying moments ago sat with their mouths hanging open. Forks hung suspended midway to mouths. Champagne flutes froze in midair. No one whispered. No one gasped. They were paralyzed collectively, witnessing a social and financial execution broadcast in 80 feet of glaring white light. Savannah slowly turned around, tracking the lack of applause. She looked up at the towering projection screen. The color drained from her face so fast, she looked like a corpse. Her mouth fell open, forming a silent scream. Her hands went completely slack, falling away from her fake baby bump. The heavy glass Platinum Visionary Award slipped from her grip. It hit the hardwood stage with a violent, sharp crack, shattering into hundreds of glittering shards around her designer heels. Liam stood paralyzed. The arrogant conqueror facade dissolved instantly. His eyes darted wildly from the federal asset freeze displaying his total financial ruin to the $29 receipt proving the child he had burned his life to the ground for never existed. He looked at the massive screen, and then he looked at Savannah. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had been played. He was bankrupt, exposed, and ruined in front of the very people he sought to impress. I remained seated in the center of the dark, silent room. The harsh light from the projector illuminated the horror on their faces perfectly. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply set my crystal champagne flute down on the table with a soft, deliberate clink and watched the empire burn. The sharp chime of crystal against glass echoed through the dead silence of the ballroom. It was the only sound in the cavernous space until the heavy double doors at the back of the venue swung open with a resounding thud. The sudden influx of light from the corridor framed a tall, broad-shouldered silhouette. Dominic stepped over the threshold. He wore a midnight blue bespoke tuxedo tailored to microscopic perfection. His posture was rigid, his stride measured and unhurried. He did not look like a man whose wife had just been globally exposed as a scheming fraud on an 80-foot projection screen. He did not look like a scorned partner arriving to demand emotional restitution or public revenge. He looked like an apex predator executing a corporate slaughter. The sea of socialites, venture capitalists, and tech billionaires parted for him instinctively. The elite crowd practically pressed themselves against the velvet-draped tables to avoid brushing against the sheer radiating hostility of his presence. Dominic marched straight down the center aisle. He kept his eyes locked dead ahead, completely ignoring the furious whispers erupting in his wake. He bypassed my table without a single glance, projecting the absolute professional detachment of a man acting strictly in his capacity as lead counsel. He reached the edge of the stage and ascended the carpeted stairs with terrifying grace. Savannah recoiled, taking 3 rapid steps backward until her spine hit the projection screen. The $29 gag receipt illuminated the back of her designer gown, branding her with her own deception. Liam remained frozen, rooted to the floorboards as Dominic closed the distance. The master of ceremonies had abandoned his post, fleeing into the wings. Dominic approached the empty podium and adjusted the microphone. When his voice boomed through the state-of-the-art sound system, it was entirely devoid of anger. It was glacial, resonant, and legally binding. Liam Hayes Dominic stated the acoustics carrying his words to every dark corner of the silent room. I am standing here tonight strictly in my capacity as lead counsel for my client, Paige Hayes. Dominic reached inside his tailored jacket and produced a thick manila envelope sealed with red legal tape. He slapped it onto the podium with a sharp, terrifying crack. You are hereby served with a civil lawsuit for severe financial marital fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and grand conspiracy to extort. Dominic declared. Your offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands are currently frozen under federal order. The commercial properties you attempted to secretly leverage have been seized. The fraudulent equity transfers have been halted. You are bankrupt. The crowd gasped collectively, a sharp intake of air that swept across the room like a sudden shift in atmospheric pressure. Dominic did not pause to let the shock settle. He unclasped the envelope and withdrew the heavy stack of court-stamped documents. He stepped around the podium and shoved the paperwork squarely into Liam's chest, forcing the man to grab the files instinctively before they hit the floor. You have 48 hours to respond to the federal injunction. Dominic continued his tone, dipping into a lethal mechanical register. My client is seeking total restitution of all siphoned assets and the immediate dissolution of your remaining corporate equity. You played a very careless game, Liam. Now you pay the toll. Liam stared at the papers in his hands, his jaw slack, his eyes darting frantically across the dense legal jargon. He was hyperventilating, gasping for air in short, desperate bursts. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a live landmine. Dominic did not wait for a rebuttal. He pivoted on his heel, turning his attention to the woman cowering against the projector screen. Savannah pressed her hands over her mouth, her fake pregnancy completely forgotten. Her carefully constructed victim persona dissolved into genuine raw terror. She looked at her husband, expecting the furious, erratic man she had manipulated to explode into a fit of rage to defend her. Instead, she found a litigator executing a sterile, calculated removal. Dominic reached into his jacket a second time. He withdrew a much thinner envelope, crisp and bright white. He walked slowly toward her, stopping inches away from her trembling frame. Savannah opened her mouth to speak, to beg to spin one final lie, but no sound came out. She was shaking so violently, the silk of her blush gown vibrated under the harsh stage lights. Dominic held out the envelope. Savannah, you are hereby served with immediate divorce proceedings, he declared, his voice echoing relentlessly through the ballroom speakers. I am seeking complete nullification of our prenuptial agreement based on documented infidelity and criminal fraud. The locks on the penthouse have already been changed. Your personal belongings will be couriered to a storage facility of your choosing. Do not attempt to contact me. He did not hand the envelope to her. He simply opened his fingers, letting the stark white papers drop directly into her shaking hands. Savannah fumbled the catch, the envelope slipping through her fingers and landing on the floor right beside the shattered remains of the Glass Visionary Award. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing hysterically, clawing at the scattered pages. Dominic did not look down. He adjusted his cuffs, turned his back on her kneeling form, and walked calmly off the stage. Up on the platform, Liam finally snapped out of his paralyzed stupor. The sheer magnitude of his ruin crushed down on him. He had lost his money, his reputation, and his leverage in less than 5 minutes. He needed a lifeline. He needed immediate capital to fight the injunctions. He needed the one man in the room powerful enough to halt a federal asset freeze and float him a bridge loan. Liam's eyes scanned the dark ballroom, frantically searching the VIP tables. He found him sitting comfortably in the second row. Trey was leaning back in his chair, his posture entirely relaxed, his expression unreadable. Liam lunged toward the edge of the stage, gripping the microphone stand with white-knuckled desperation. Trey, Liam shouted, his voice cracking over the speakers, echoing with pathetic, frantic urgency. Trey, you have to help me. They set me up. This is a complete fabrication. We have the merger. You know I am good for the capital. You have to back my accounts. Call your bank. Please. The entire room pivoted to watch the notoriously private wealth manager. Trey did not flinch under the sudden massive spotlight. He sat in the quiet dark, assessing the broken, sweating man begging from the stage. Slowly, Trey reached for his crystal champagne flute. He lifted the glass into the air, raising it high in a deliberate, mocking toast to Liam's complete and utter annihilation. He held the pose for 2 agonizing seconds, allowing the absolute finality of the rejection to burn into Liam's retinas. Then Trey lowered his glass. He did not take a sip. He set it down on the table, stood up, and offered his arm to Jasmine. She took it, her head held high, her silk gown sweeping elegantly across the carpet. Without a single word, Trey turned his back on the stage. The crowd parted for them instantly, clearing a wide path to the exit. Liam watched them go, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish as the heavy mahogany doors swung shut behind the only lifeline he had left. The heavy mahogany doors swinging shut behind Trey was the last sound Liam heard as a man operating in the elite echelons of Seattle society. When the heavy wooden gavel slammed down in the King County Family Court 3 months later, it sounded exactly the same. The transition from the opulent velvet-draped gala to the sterile fluorescent-lit courtroom was a jarring, brutal reality check. There were no crystal chandeliers here. There was no champagne to hide behind, and no wealthy audience to manipulate. There was only the cold, polished oak of the defendant's table, the harsh, glaring lights overhead, and the absolute clinical precision of Dominic standing at the podium. The trial was not a standard legal proceeding. It was an absolute massacre. Dominic did not raise his voice. He did not pace the floor or engage in theatrical courtroom theatrics. He operated with the cold surgical detachment of a coroner dissecting a corpse. He had successfully petitioned to consolidate the financial fraud civil suit with the dual divorce proceedings, creating a multi-front legal war that Liam and Savannah's bargain rate attorneys were entirely unequipped to handle. Dominic began the slaughter with Liam. He projected the financial forensic reports onto the large courtroom monitors, detailing every single routed transaction, every hidden Cayman Island trust, and every forged signature on the patio property deeds. He laid out a paper trail so dense, meticulous, and irrefutable that Liam's defense attorney actually stopped objecting halfway through the morning session, sinking lower into his chair with quiet defeat. The evidence was absolute. Liam sat at his table, his bespoke tailored suits replaced by an ill-fitting gray off-the-rack jacket, his face pale and slick with a cold sweat. He looked 10 years older, his arrogant conqueror facade entirely evaporated into a hollow shell of panic. Then Dominic delivered the fatal blow to Liam's professional life. He submitted Exhibit 42, a certified formal letter from the board of directors at Liam's former investment firm. Dominic read the text aloud into the public record, his voice steady and relentless. The letter detailed Liam's immediate termination with cause, citing a severe and irreversible violation of the executive morality clause. The firm, having been fully briefed on the offshore embezzlement, the fraudulent gala pledges, and the patio scandal, had severed all ties. They systematically stripped Liam of his unvested equity, revoked his lucrative severance package, and publicly disavowed his actions. He was blacklisted from the financial sector permanently. His career was ash. Judge Eris Thorne, a notoriously strict magistrate with zero tolerance for perjury or financial deception, did not hesitate. Based on the overwhelming evidence of marital fraud and malicious financial manipulation, the judge ruled entirely in my favor. Liam was stripped of all marital assets. The court ordered the immediate liquidation of his remaining personal portfolios to provide total restitution for the funds he had attempted to steal from my crisis management agency. He walked into that courtroom hoping to salvage a fraction of his stolen empire, and he was walking out with absolutely nothing but the clothes on his back and a permanently destroyed reputation. Dominic did not even pause to take a sip of water before pivoting his crosshairs directly onto Savannah. Savannah sat trembling at the adjacent table, clutching a crumpled tissue, her knuckles white. The blush-pink designer gowns and manufactured glowing victim persona were completely gone. She wore a drab beige blouse, her hair pulled back into a severe, tight knot, looking every bit the desperate, cornered animal she truly was. She watched Dominic approach the stand with wide, terrified eyes, her breath hitching audibly in the quiet courtroom. Dominic picked up a single manila folder from his desk. He extracted a pristine, bound document and submitted it to the judge. It was their original prenuptial agreement. Years ago, blinded by her eagerness to secure her proximity to Dominic's immense wealth, Savannah had eagerly signed the ironclad document without bothering to comprehend the fine print. Dominic had drafted it himself. It was a masterpiece of protective litigation. He read Section 4, Paragraph B aloud to the silent room. The clause explicitly stated that in the event of documented infidelity, coupled with financial fraud or public deception, the offending spouse forfeited any and all rights to spousal support, alimony, and asset division. Savannah's attorney, a visibly exhausted lawyer who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, stood up to argue that the terms were unconscionable and excessively punitive. Dominic immediately produced the high-resolution photographs, the hotel security footage, and the $29 gag gift ultrasound receipt. He proved beyond a shadow of a legal doubt that Savannah had not only violated the infidelity clause, but had engaged in a calculated malicious conspiracy to defraud. Judge Thorne reviewed the evidence, nodded sharply, and upheld the prenuptial agreement in its entirety. Savannah was awarded absolutely zero assets from the marriage. Not a single cent of Dominic's wealth would ever touch her bank account again. But Dominic was not finished. He moved in for the final surgical strike. He submitted a stack of credit card statements 3 inches thick, dropping them onto the wooden rail with a heavy thud. During her months of plotting, Savannah had lived a desperate delusion. She had accrued massive, crippling debt to maintain the illusion of a wealthy lifestyle. She had maxed out 6 different platinum credit cards, buying designer clothes, booking luxury hotel suites, paying for fake public relations placements, and purchasing endless props to sell her fabricated pregnancy to the elite wives of Seattle. She had charged over $150,000, assuming she would easily pay it all off the moment she secured her massive divorce settlement or gained access to Liam's stolen funds. Dominic methodically proved that every single one of those purchases was made independently by Savannah for the express purpose of maintaining a fraudulent public persona. Because he had successfully nullified her access to his estate, and because the court had already recognized her actions as criminal fraud, the judge ruled that the debt could not be considered a shared marital burden. Judge Thorne slammed the gavel down, declaring the massive credit card debt solely and entirely Savannah's legal responsibility. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Savannah collapsed forward, burying her face in her arms and sobbing openly into the polished wood of the table. She was completely destitute. She had no home, no husband, no wealthy benefactor, and no escape. She was saddled with a mountain of high-interest debt that she would spend the rest of her natural life trying to dig herself out of working minimum wage jobs just to cover the monthly penalty fees. Liam sat just a few feet away, staring blankly at the wall, completely paralyzed by the totality of his own ruin. They had tried to build an empire on lies and theft, and Dominic had just systematically dismantled their entire existence brick by brick, leaving them buried under the rubble. I sat in the gallery watching the bailiff hand them their final judgments, my posture perfectly straight and my conscience entirely clear. The transition from the stifling air of that courtroom to the crisp elevation of my new life took exactly 6 weeks. The sterile oak tables and the suffocating desperation of the gallery faded into insignificance, replaced by the quiet, humming power of my new reality. That reality occupied the entire 42nd floor of Seattle's most exclusive residential high-rise. It was a fortress of glass and steel suspended high above the clouds, completely detached from the wreckage I had left burning on the ground. I stood in the center of the sprawling living room, watching the city transition from dusk to twilight. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire space, offering an unobstructed panoramic view of the glittering metropolis below. The interior was a masterclass in modern opulence, featuring dark, wide plank hardwood floors, imported Italian marble countertops, and custom-commissioned artwork that spoke of quiet, absolute wealth. There were no ghosts here. There were no memories of a failed marriage or a deceptive partner. This space was entirely mine, built on a foundation of unyielding truth and ruthless strategy. Tonight, the penthouse was alive with the low murmur of sophisticated conversation and the clinking of heavy silver. I was hosting an intimate, highly exclusive dinner party to commemorate the closing of the chapter. I had hired a private chef who currently operated in the open-concept kitchen, plating a flawless 7-course tasting menu that included butter, poached lobster, and Wagyu beef. The air smelled of white truffle reduction and expensive cedarwood. Seated at the massive dining table were the only people who mattered in this new era. Trey sat near the head of the table, swirling a heavy crystal glass of vintage Pinot Noir. The rigid tension that had defined his posture during the chaotic weeks of the patio scandal and the foundation gala was entirely gone. He radiated the relaxed, easy power of a man whose financial empire was completely secure. Jasmine sat closely beside him, looking breathtaking in a sleek emerald gown that felt like a subtle nod to the armor I had worn on the night of the gala. They were laughing, a rich, genuine sound that bounced off the vaulted ceilings. Trey caught my eye across the room and raised his glass in a silent, solemn toast. He was acknowledging the restored order. The toxic elements had been surgically removed, the corporate merger was thriving, and the social hierarchy of the city had been violently, permanently reset. I nodded back, acknowledging his respect. A few feet away, standing casually by the massive marble kitchen island, was Dominic. He had discarded his formal suit jacket and loosened his silk tie, his crisp white dress shirt rolled up neatly at the forearms. It revealed the heavy vintage chronograph watch on his wrist, and a demeanor that was completely at ease, yet perpetually sharp. In his hand, he held a heavy tumbler filled with a rare 20-year-old bourbon I had sourced specifically for his arrival. I walked over to the island carrying my own glass of bourbon. I leaned against the cool stone facing him. There were no longing glances between us. There was no lingering touch, no hidden romantic tension, and absolutely no cliché spark of sudden passion. What existed between Dominic and me was infinitely rarer and significantly more dangerous. It was the profound, unspoken respect of two apex predators who had been thrown into the same bloodied waters and had emerged completely unscathed. We had stood back to back in the gladiatorial arena of public opinion and legal warfare, armed with nothing but intellect and clinical precision. We had executed a flawless defense and an even more devastating offense. Dominic turned his head, his dark eyes reflecting the ambient glow of the city lights outside. He did not smile broadly, but a distinct look of dark satisfaction settled into his sharp features. He tapped the rim of his tumbler against mine. The crystal produced a clear, resonant chime that stood in absolute defiance to the sound of Savannah's shattered trophy. To a perfectly clean slate, Dominic set his voice a low, steady rumble over the ambient jazz playing through the sound system. To burning the rot to ash, I replied, maintaining direct eye contact as I took a slow-burning sip of the amber liquid. We did not mention Liam. We did not mention Savannah. They were deleted files erased completely from the hard drives of our lives. They were currently navigating the brutal, grueling reality of minimum wage existence and crushing endless debt entirely forgotten by the elite circles they had tried so desperately to conquer. They were nothing but a cautionary tale, a footnote in the history of our success. I pushed off the marble island and walked slowly toward the massive expanse of glass that formed the western wall of the penthouse. The city stretched out beneath me, a sprawling, glowing grid of electricity, ambition, and endless movement. Tiny cars flowed along the highways, like blood pumping through concrete veins. Thousands of illuminated windows represented hundreds of thousands of lives, all playing their own separate games of survival and elevation. I pressed my fingertips against the cool glass, feeling the faint vibration of the wind against the high-rise. The skyline was undeniably beautiful, but it was also a battlefield. It was a massive, unforgiving board game, where the weak were ultimately consumed, and the careless were unceremoniously discarded. Liam and Savannah had thought they were clever. They had thought their amateur deceptions, their stolen funds, and their fake pregnancies could magically elevate them to the top of the pyramid. They believed that playing dirty automatically guaranteed a victory. They had confused betrayal with strategy. I took one last long breath of the pristine, elevated air in my penthouse. I looked down at the glittering empire below me, feeling the absolute weight of my own autonomy. They thought cheating meant they were winning the game. They forgot one thing: I'm the one who deals the cards. The story of Paige's calculated triumph serves as a powerful reminder that true strength lies in emotional discipline and strategic foresight. When faced with ultimate betrayal, it is tempting to react with explosive anger. However, Paige proves that maintaining your composure is the ultimate weapon against deceit. By meticulously gathering evidence and executing her retaliation with surgical precision, she dismantled a fraudulent empire and reclaimed her autonomy entirely. Her journey teaches us that survival is not about fighting loudly. It is about holding the cards and knowing when to play them. Share your thoughts on this in the comments below.